press record. So
Yeah.
I used to rap.
Oh, awesome.
I used to be a rapper. It was in college, and I went to University of Miami, and I was in a couple shows down there. And when I would record, I would always hate the way I sounded. And live, everybody loved my stuff, and I got a lot more positive feedback performing live than I did recording. The recordings always they were missing something. It didn't sound good.
Yeah.
And it drove me nuts. And I think I just discovered when I was buying equipment for the podcast, I just figured out what I did wrong, like for 10 years of my life. And it was that I was using a condenser mic instead of a dynamic mic. And so for this, once I started using these mics, they're dynamic mics, and it just sounds much more natural.
Yeah.
And so I've really come to appreciate being able to hear myself in an accurate way while we're doing these things.
Yeah, I remember my first experience with this was recording myself because I wanted to memorize something.
Yep.
And so like I played it, I think it was like Romeo and Juliet doing a Shakespeare type, had to present in front of a class and he wanted to do it. Yeah. I still can remember it today, like the words, because I practiced it over and over. But I remember thinking to myself like, wow, I sound so terrible, right? Because it's like you hear yourself a certain way, and then when you're actually doing this, it's completely different. So it's cool.
Well, now you can, so the thing I like about this is now you can modulate your voice to make it sound how you like to hear it, and you can hear what it's going to sound like on the recording in real time.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll get used to this and probably like it.
You probably will. It'll be good. Let me just put my phone on Do Not Disturb because, well, it goes off all the time.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for our viewers, this is, I guess, Sam Eddinger with Ironclad Property Management. And we have found ourselves in complementary areas of the same field-ish. And, you were someone that I really looked forward to having on the podcast because for two reasons. One, your experience in this is actually, you've been doing it a lot longer than me, right? You've been working in a different kind of space or angle at property management. And you have a very astute business mind. And I've enjoyed our conversations, talking numbers, talking business models and processes. And I feel like I've learned a lot from you, and you really analyze things in a way that, I find, what's the word I'm looking for? Impressive. I guess that's the easiest word. It impresses me, and I can see why you've had the success you've had. And so you were just someone that I thought would be a great fit to kind of just chat with. And we get calls, well, not anymore. We'll get into it. But I used to get calls when I was doing PPC, like pay-per-click for the website, all the time for people looking to rent units. And I was like, we don't do that kind of stuff. But you can call Sam over at Ironclad. And so I was just sending them your way. But I didn't get a single lead on someone who was looking for an HOA management company. So I ended up stopping the pay-per-click stuff and just doing SEO. And I know you've gotten plenty of calls for people looking for HOA management companies. Yep. And you're like, we don't do that.
Yep.
So
100%.
So, Sam has sent us a number of accounts and clients, and I'm super appreciative for that and grateful. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And yeah, man. So let's get started. I mean, how long have you been in business? Tell us a little bit about your business and, just kind of how you got here.
Yeah. So it's a great story. So I'll go a little bit further back than just when my business started. So grew up local to here in Middletown, actually.
Okay.
And my dad and mom started a family. I have 4 brothers, no sisters. And my dad was a shop teacher. And he never really understood the stock market. He never really understood investing. But as a shop teacher, he knew how to build houses. He knew how to renovate. And he always had this philosophy, which was that housing was a tangible asset. He could see it, feel it, touch it. And so we were around paintbrushes and demoing stuff, ripping stuff out, throwing it in dumpsters, even at a young age. And so, but what I saw really was a few things. One, working hard, what you can accomplish. So my dad on a teacher's salary is a multimillionaire now because of the real estate he's held. And one of the things was he specifically did it in real estate. He didn't buy stocks. I don't even think he knows how to buy a stock, to this date. And so what I realized is one of the things is even, people talk about diversification, but in reality, you should invest in the things that you know and know really well. So I'm overweight in real estate as well because of the fact that I know real estate really well. And so, but seeing my father do this, it made me really, and all my brothers have the bug for real estate and entrepreneurship. And so what we did was when we came back to Connecticut back in 2008, started immediately looking to buy real estate.
Good time to buy real estate.
It was a very, well, actually, I didn't even actually buy the first property until about 2012.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that was even better than 2008 because 2008, like, it didn't crash everywhere at the same time. Like right now, the market's crashing in certain parts of this country, but like Connecticut's holding up really, really well.
Yeah, we're delayed.
And so, like, I think there's certain microeconomic things that we can talk about if you want or not that really kind of dictate about whether or not it's a good time to purchase or not. So, but back in 2012, started purchasing aggressively. I was screaming it from the mountaintop, like, look, like you can't build a single family house with a lot of land, plot of land for $80,000, and I was buying them $80,000, and all they needed was like a floor to get resurfaced and paint.
Right.
And it was really simple, but the returns weren't very good because at that point in time, a single family rental would be like $1,200-$1,300, and I was in it for $100. So people would like, oh, you need the 2% rule or whatever, but I had a different theory, and the different theory was that these houses cost a lot more to build. And if they cost more to build, they have to eventually go up in value, right? Because if it costs less to build than it does now, or if building costs are decreasing, well, then housing costs are going to go down as well because there'll be an oversaturation of property building, right? So just kind of saw that writing on the wall. But continuing on to this, so I started buying it aggressively as an engineer. And then in engineering, I kind of hit my glass ceiling. And I always had this entrepreneurial bent because of the fact that my family does it. And so we got to the point where I was like, look, either I'm going to stay as an engineer and begrudgingly do that, or I'm going to quit and do something else. And my brother actually owns a property management company as well in Connecticut. So we compete and cooperate. And so ultimately talked with him and decided, what should we do to business together, right? And we started the property management company. I later bought out his interest. And just like you and I, we cooperate as well because I'm really looking for investors and he's really looking for accidental landlords, single families, and I'm looking for more multi. So even in that way, we can cooperate. We do sometimes compete because I do take singles in certain areas and he takes multis in certain areas. But in general, I can throw him a lot of singles. Even this morning, there was a lead that I found in an area that I won't manage that he probably would love. And there's stuff that he doesn't really want to do because it's maybe a harder part of New Britain or something. And I'm perfectly supportive of that. So that's kind of how I got started. That was back in 2018. And haven't really looked back since. And it's been quite a journey. And I'm really looking forward to the future. Once you get past, the 2 to 3 year time frame, that's when you can kind of see whether or not you're probably going to make it or not, right? Like we're talking about, a lot of people can't make it that long and that far, and that's for various reasons, right? Because there is a lot of stress in this business, running businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really cool story. I did not know. And you might have told me before, but I didn't know you were an engineer.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? In retrospect.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And so that's great. And so it's interesting that you bring up that you kind of approached it as an investor first, and then property management. Because especially being an investor in multis, property management, if you want to maximize your returns, is part of the deal, right? You're managing your own properties. So if you're already doing it for your own, why not do it for other people's?
Sure.
And I landed in this property management space similarly. I was an investor. I bought a condo cash, right? I liquidated my retirement, bought a condo cash, and it was just the HOA that I bought in was just a rolling dumpster fire. And just out of just sheer desperation and preservation and fear, I was like, guys, this is terrible. I think I can do it better. And they gave me a shot, and apparently they thought I could do it better too. And we did it better, and it just kind of kept growing from there, right? Yeah. And it was, I didn't have any desire to get into property management in any capacity, really. I was even looking to hire a property manager for the investment properties we had. And I only ended up in HOA management as a need to try to preserve my own investment and not lose all my money.
Sure.
You know?
That's actually one of the reasons why I specifically don't buy any condos, is because I don't trust the HOA. Like when times are rough, I remember back in 2012, 2013 timeframe, that one of the single biggest things that you'd have to look at when buying condos was whether or not they were well funded for the reserves, because so many people were losing their property. Well, if they're not paying their mortgage, they're not paying the HOA fees, they're not paying their tax, they're not paying anything.
Right.
And so a lot of these associations can get into trouble because of the fact that they're underfunded. And so, like, for those reasons, I didn't want to have to get involved all the time with, specifically the things that you now deal with. And that's a lot of the reason why we can be completely cooperative, even though we're in the same markets, right? Like, I don't want to do association management anywhere in the state.
Right.
And you're perfectly happy doing it, and vice versa, where I think you probably don't want to deal with the tenants as much because it's a little bit more complainy, whiny. You get your own challenges.
Yeah.
And so it can be very complementary in that case. And that's really, I think what's really important about running any business is really understanding what is this niche that you're trying to fill. And as long as you're really super focused on, okay, this is the exact niche that I want to fulfill, you have a better chance of being successful. The people that want to do it all are the ones that are going to lose, because you can't do everything well all at once, right? You can't scale that. You have to scale it like at a niche, and then you end up expanding. Like even Amazon, one of the biggest businesses in the world, started with books, used books. And it was the fulfillment of those used books. And then it became electronics, and then it came whatever else. And then it became everything, right? Warehousing and doing third-party distribution. And because they're really, their really company is not about books. It's about, providing great service and delivery systems, Logistics. Yep. And so it's like one of those things, though. It's more about, you knew what you wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. And so it was very easy for me to say, hey, Jared runs a good shop. Why don't you give him a try? And then vice versa. And that's really sometimes the best relationships are ones where they can complement in those ways. And then we can both do our own marketing and help support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely appreciate that. And the more I got into this side of property management, I actually sold off all my properties.
Nice.
Because I didn't have enough to really turn it over to a manager, like a big enough portfolio. And I got to the point where I had 500 unit owners that kind of felt like tenants. And I was like, I don't want any more tenants of my own.
Sure.
And, we did the whole house hacking thing where we were living next to one of our tenants and being landlords. And it really stressed my wife out, and it stressed me out. But, just for our sanity, she was like, I want to buy a single family. I'm like, it's a liability. It's an entire liability, right? There's no asset other than appreciation that you may or may not get. Like, it just doesn't cash flow. I don't want a single family. And she was like, I want to go look at this house in Higginham in the woods. And I was like, this is stupid. We got there. Long story short, we both loved the house. And I looked at it and I was like, well, I essentially bought it as a peace of mind, right? Like it's a place where I can go where I don't have to deal with the chaos that is property management. And so I sold off all my properties, and it's worked out in that sense where it's like, it's my little reprieve where I don't have to, we're in the woods. You can't see the neighbors. Like, just leave me alone.
Sure.
Right. And trying to pay it off in like 10 years.
Nice.
It'll be, and then it'll be an asset if you choose to convert it one day. But
it's interesting you say that. And I've, where I really am in this journey is it's a mindset shift. You say that it's not an asset, and I would have completely and utterly agreed with you even probably a year ago for the last 40 years of my life.
Yep.
But what's interesting is I'm starting to change mentality slightly.
Okay.
And as you go and you get bigger and bigger and better, you probably will make a similar shift. Okay. So I have really good friends who live here in Middletown, and they have this fantastic, almost mansion that they purchased.
Right.
So, well, that's a bigger liability. Well, no, it's not. The reason why is because they do like parties every month. And those parties then allow them to interact with people and give this huge, meaningful connection which allows them to possibly sell more business, do this, make those connections, and then have it be something that is a driver of the business in a bigger way, right? So like sometimes you can think about it where you can actually, if you do it right, you can actually make something that's a liability into an asset by, in some regards, repurposing it, right? So there's actually a tax rule called the Augusta rule.
Okay.
I'm not a CPA, so don't talk to your CPA if you want to. But in Augusta, Georgia, with the masters, they made a specific law that people could rent out their house tax-free during that period. So some businesses, they rent out like the owner's like property.
Yeah.
The owner doesn't have to pay taxes on it.
Okay.
But then ultimately the business gets to write it as an expense.
Huh.
So there's things like that too that even becomes an asset. There's a certain number of days that you can do it, but you think about it as like events. So it becomes about events. So if you have this beautiful property that you want to rent out to your business or to someone else's business, well, now it can kind of become an asset in a way, right?
Interesting.
And or like if you're doing great things and amazing things, and you have those influential people that you're supporting, your Dream 100 or whoever you're marketing with, you can't write that off if you're having your own party, but it really becomes a venue where you're giving them this experiential event that they're never going to forget, and they're going to remember you whenever XYZ happens. Right, so then it becomes this source of marketing goodwill that then allows you to get more business. So there's ways of like thinking about things like a little differently, but but you think about it as just because in the first level of entrepreneurship or whatever is, well, I don't get any money from it, so it's a liability, and that's true for most people. But as you get up there more and more in business, like these liabilities can actually become assets, and that's why I was even thinking about it, like why is it that billionaires have yachts? People talk about it all the time. Well, it's because they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. And that is true partially. But the real reason is because the only people that billionaires really associate with is other billionaires. So how do you get other billionaires to want to come hang out with you?
Sick yacht.
And models and things like that. So it's like, it makes sense why it happens when you think about it in that context. But why is it that these billionaires need to rub shoulders with other billionaires? Well, it's because they're the ones that have the oversized potential to move each business cumulatively, based on the relationships that they have and the networking that they can do. So this is why all these influential people end up rubbing shoulders with each other, because it's a different game that they're playing. And so we as relatively low on the totem pole don't get it yet. But as we start to get better and better in business, some of our minds are going to open as to why these things actually happen. And they actually happen for very good reasons. And the media always talks about them like, the rich people and their yachts and they're playing. And there is something to that. But a lot of it's for more reasons like, if I was a billionaire, do I really associate with people that are millionaires? Right. No, I got bigger problems, right? Like, and so the headspace and all of you have to kind of start leveling up your friends. And that's a lot of the business side as well. So.
Yeah. And I talk about that all the time. I think Alex Hormozy has a really simple metric. I don't know if you watch Alex.
I love Alex.
Yeah, he's great. So he goes like, you have the ability to kind of network up to 5x, your annual income, right? So if you're making 100K a year in your sphere, you can probably provide value to someone who's making up to 500K a year. But someone who's making $2 million a year, you probably don't have a lot of value to provide to them. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to get them in your circle of friends, in your sphere.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to level. You got to level up incrementally.
Sure.
So
that's one thing to it. But there's another ulterior mentality, which is you don't need to level up incrementally. What you need to do is you need to become an expert in a very small niche, like super small, right? Because then you can be in such high demand in that niche that then you can level up. Right, so it's a different game, because every single one of us has some sort of superpower that's worth way more than our average cost to utilize us. So it's like this woman that I was chatting with recently. She's like, "Oh, you really understand Appfolio well?" It's like, "Yeah." She's like, "So can I hire you?" I said, "Maybe." I said, I don't want to brag or anything. She's like, and I was like, you probably can't afford me. And I wasn't like trying to be disrespectful. I said, like, I'll give you free time, but like if you want a reoccurring relationship where I take away time from my normal schedule, I got to be at least 2 times my average what I make for myself, right? Because it's a consulting fee essentially.
Yeah.
And so I was 10 times more than she wanted to pay essentially.
Yeah.
And it was, and so, but what does that mean? That means that my knowledge base at this point is higher than an entry level accounting position, right?
Yep.
And that's perfectly fine. Like
In your niche, right?
Yeah, in my niche. And so like I could probably get a couple hours from her if I wanted to, but at the same point in time, like starting a reoccurring relationship, she needs someone that's a lot more cost effective, right?
Right.
But with your comment about Alex, like that, it's completely true that he talks about it, and even there's a comment from I think Warren Buffett when he was trying to have Ben Graham become his mentor, and he said something about Ben said that this is the most expensive. You're the most expensive person I've ever took on. He's like, but I'm doing it for free. He's like, I know, but your expectation is you're going to have to take my hours away from me to teach you in things.
Yep.
Right. And so Alex did the same thing with, I think, his neighbor, and he like taught him to be like this super salesperson. So it's the same concept. Like you go into those situations, you have to give first, and you have to try to do it in a way that is like literally just providing tons of value and like pretty much never asking. You keep giving it to them until they ask, hey, you're doing such an awesome job. Like, what can I do for you? Right. And that's when you then cash in the chips. But like literally when you're playing with those big of people, you really have to just keep giving and never ask in return. And so many people play the short game. And that's one of the biggest things that I see that's problematic in this industry is, the whole concept of real estate and real estate investing. It's get rich quick, right? Oh, I'm going to get rich. Oh, I'm going to be able to quit my job. I'm going to be able to do all this stuff. When in the reality, it's really like how my dad did it. You get rich over a 30 or 40 year time frame.
Right.
Right. And
building those relationships.
And building those relationships and building the properties that finally cash flow, and you finally pay off the mortgage, and you finally have it operating well. It takes time. But the relationships also, it takes time. And this is why I think and I appreciate so much like the roles of my family. Right. And like all my brothers and I moved back to be closer to my family here in Middletown. Because the good name that my dad set as a foundation in this area has carried on for all my brothers and I. Like you'd say the name Eddinger in Middletown, people know my mom, my dad, they know a lot of us. We went through the school systems and we always were good kids. We didn't really make much trouble. And so like that legacy, that name in Middletown means something, right? So I can get away with, asking for favors or doing things that maybe I wouldn't be able to if I just moved in because no one knows me.
Right.
And so like, but that is the whole concept of, your network is your net worth, right?
Right.
But it's also then standing on the shoulders of giants, like my father before me, who then allowed me to kind of be where I am. And I'm so appreciative of that because, so many other people that you interact with, their parents never gave them that same head start.
Right.
Because they made a bad decision or they, for whatever reason, didn't give that level of, quality, and my word is my, I will do everything then break my promise, know? So.
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal point. And, I look at my own story because, as you know, I'm in recovery, and there was a period of time where I wanted nothing more than to leave Connecticut and start fresh somewhere else. And I believe I was at a treatment center, and one of the counselors says, hey, you should grow where your roots are, right? And, so I ended up trying to get a job out in California where I was at the time, and it didn't work out, and I ended up back in Connecticut. And now, looking back 10 years later, it's like, man, I'm glad I'm here. And it's not just, it's not just because I have deep roots here, because I do have some roots here, but there's a familiarity with it. There's a, I understand the markets, like different areas around Connecticut, what the general demographics are, what kind of, what the property's like, what the people are like, all that stuff. So there's that familiarity, but there's also this idea of, overcoming, people that knew me before, people who knew me in my late teens and early 20s, be like, man, he's doing good now. What's he doing different? And you say, yeah, turn my life around, start acting better, been in recovery, doing the right things, and I find that the impact is so much greater than if I just did a fresh start somewhere else. Because in a fresh start, people only know you as this, upstanding individual.
Sure.
And here it's like, I would say half the associations I work with have Googled me and been like, you've got some arrests from 2012. Like, what's that all about? What are these charges and stuff like that? And I'm able to be like, yeah, that's part of my story. But, look what we're doing now.
Sure.
And we've got 12 12 associations, and not a single one has ever wanted to not work with us. We have very lenient contracts. If I were still that person, everybody would be very keenly aware of that fact. Right?
Sure.
It's not something
Absolutely.
that you hide, right?
Yeah, you can't hide it for long.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Reputation is so important in any business. And so we focus that a lot in our company. And I'm sure you should, if you're not, do the same. Right. Just when you give great service, ask for a review. Right. It's pretty cheap. They can provide value to you, and they can appreciate you in that way. And I applaud you for actually coming back to Connecticut, because while I understand the concept of staying in a place where people don't know you, so you can start fresh.
Right.
I do feel like there's a little bit of that's escaping. Right. And if you really are making the change, like, hopefully when you come back, you have support systems, because if you don't, well, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
But if you can do it in your own backyard, and you can then be that light to other people that knew you when maybe you were making worse decisions, well, you can be that much more influential. Right. And I don't want to get too about past and things like that, but as a Christian, I feel like God puts you in a position to be able to be a light for someone else. So in my specific situation, you can look me up, my mom died tragically in a hit-and-run car accident a couple miles from here. Okay. About 7.5 years ago. And what I realize is that allows me to minister to people that have tragedy that occur in their lives. Right. And so, like, it becomes a blessing for those people to be able to say, I know what you're going through. You'll be able to get through it. It'll take some time. There'll be some pain. There'll be a lot of uncomfort and sadness, but there is another side to it. Right. And so that's a beautiful thing with you as well. And take those opportunities to build into people that are going through it. And, I'm so much about second chances, and you're a perfect example of why people need second chances. Right.
And that's a beautiful story. And I love to hear that. I love to, there's not as a Christian as well, like, there's not enough people, in my opinion. I feel like we could all benefit if more people were kind of walking the spiritual path, right?
Sure.
There's so many benefits to that. And I think that might answer some of the questions that I had for you later on. But, it's just far as how you keep your sanity through this highly stressful work and dealing with difficult people, right? But, that's a beautiful story, and thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry for your loss.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done a lot of work around it.
Yeah.
So no, that's phenomenal. I think we're on the same page with regards to that. Let's see what else we got.
And I think that while you're looking up your question, that's kind of, we talked a little bit about mindset. And that's really when you are a healthy person, it's about reframing your past, your present, and your future.
Yeah.
So if you reframe your past as experiences that allow you to be who you are today and have shaped you positively,
right,
that's a beautiful thing. When it's debilitating you and you're, PTSD, or, you're constantly crying over the loss that you have,
right,
it doesn't allow you to move forward positively. So it's the framing of the past that really is important. And then the framing of a better future, that's also important. Right. And so there's a guy, Viktor Frankl, who talks about him in concentration camps. Mm-hmm. And he was a psychologist, and he could tell when people were going to die. Okay. In the concentration camps. Yeah. Because what they would do is they would have given up. That they would be looking at the past and remember the past without any goal towards the future. That they were never going to get out there. And so because they were never giving up the hope that there was a better future, they'd end up dying.
Interesting.
And so it's really, there's a lot of psychology around it about, the reframing of your past, actually a reframing of your future, and trying to live your future today. And it's kind of a very interesting thing, but it's like, this is where I want to be. What do I do today to be there? Right. So it's doing that, yeah.
And so many books, Think and Grow Rich. There's just trying to manifest that by bringing our actions and our mindset in congruence with where we want to be, right? Not necessarily where we were or where we are today. And I love that. And actually another person, I mean, this is a very polarizing figure, but I really like him, is David Goggins. And his book is all about, you know, what you're talking about, reframing the stuff we've been through and just like you can channel all of that negative stuff into a chip that just drives you to go harder and be more successful and get through painful situations, looking back on the painful situations that already didn't break you.
Sure.
Right. And you know, I know he's a little bit of an internet meme in just a lot of the shorts he does, but in reading his book and really kind of diving into what's underneath that mindset, I was really impressed and I resonated with it deeply.
It's interesting. So like I read a book about entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs in general are people that are better at accepting and going with chaos.
Yes.
And so the whole concept of a chip on your shoulder that, you know, people always like think less of you than they should, or Tom Brady stories, whatever you want to talk about. I actually have the opposite issue.
Okay.
Because like my life, relatively speaking, I talked about my great parents that loved me, right? Supported me. I didn't have any issues with addiction like you did, that I needed to reframe and get over. So like I didn't have that chaos.
Okay.
That drove me.
Right.
And so like I actually am struggling a lot right now because I've done a lot. Like, why do I need to keep going? Whereas if you have that chip that always keeps you going more and more and more and more, that drives you. So like that's exactly like my struggle right now, is that transition to be like, how far do I go? Interesting.
So I was going to save this for the end. This is my wild card question that I came up with when I saw you drive in. And you know, you've given me the privilege of we've chatted in your office and you've let me look under the hood.
Sure.
And I know that you do very well in your business and you're very, very successful. And I saw the car you drove up in, and there's this idea of artificial scarcity, right? And frugality that is very common amongst millionaires and people of high net worth, right?
Well,
right.
I would say, you know, I love where you're going with this question.
Yeah.
I would say that no, people like me that drive cars like this are not high net worth. There's another level of net worth
that you're trying to get to,
that people doing what I'm doing can't get to. So, but finish your question.
Okay. Well, you're already jumping right into it, which is where I wanted to go is, you know, I just want your perspective on that, just for the viewers, because they don't see the car. What kind of car is it?
So I purchased about 7 or 8 years ago, a 1999 Nissan Sentra for $650.
Correct.
And I still drive it today.
Right.
And its air conditioning still works, surprisingly. But other things are starting to break. And I am looking to purchase another car, and I'm eyeing an $1,800 Nissan Sentra or a $1,500 Nissan Sentra too, because I just like them.
Right.
But yeah.
And you could, I mean, it's not just that he has the money in the bank to buy this in cash. It's like he could earn that money in less than an 8-hour workday.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just such a huge paradigm shift. And through all the books on wealth we've read, we understand that, or that I've read, and I'm sure you have as well. We understand that frugality and saving costs is, and not being showy, right, is just such a huge component that I struggle with. It's something that I have to make a concerted effort for, because, you know, my parent, that's not how I grew up.
Sure.
You know, and that's something that I've looked at my mom specifically, who had a high income, but also had a high spending, right? And she could have done, even though she did well, she could have done much better had she been a little more conservative with her expenditures.
Sure.
So I just want to understand that mindset from you, and this idea of artificial scarcity, where you're trying to go and kind of what drives you to that. Because, you know, you say you don't have that chip that motivates you, but it's clear that you are still self-motivated to a degree that very few people in this world are.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. When I say things, when you start to get into spheres like us, there's like levels of like, I'm never going to be like Tom Brady. Like I would be, you know, if I wanted to be professional, I'd be like a kicker or something. Right?
Okay,
like, and so it's like levels of motivation. But when you see these great figures, like you start comparing yourself to them. And like, I could see myself as someone that like rubs shoulders with Tom Brady, where people are like, oh, he's my idol. I'd be like, he's a person. Like you eventually get to a point where people are just people. But I think that, so a couple things. I think one is I have a very large underdeveloped sense of how people perceive me or anyone. What does that mean? That means that I didn't care that when I grew up, I wore clothing that I purchased from the Goodwill store. Like nothing about that made me wake up and be ashamed or embarrassed.
Right.
I think I possibly am a little bit autistic. And so like I just, we all have something, right? But from that perspective, like my kids are more embarrassed by the car that I have. And I take pride in it because for a couple of different reasons, one of which I'll describe here. There's a few things about it. So one, it started from my father and from my grandfather, who were, kids of the Great Depression, right? And so like not having enough. And so like figuring out how to repurpose, to conserve. So it's very strongly ingrained in my family. There's actually someone that I think said it very poignantly to me recently, which was when you talk to your kids about food, do you say, did you have enough or was it delicious? And so if you ask the question every time, did you have enough to eat? It's coming from a mentality of scarcity. And if you ask the question, how did the food taste? It's coming up from a mentality of abundance. And so, growing up, it was never waste. It was never do this. It was never do that. So that served me very well. It's actually, I think, one of the hallmarks of millionaires, of that whole mentality is to only spend money on things that you truly need to and reinvest everything else. But I said that millionaires do that, but really rich people don't. Like Elon Musk can't clip coupons his way to another $1 billion.
Correct.
Right? So like when you get to higher and higher levels of wealth building, like literally I'm starting to struggle with the mentality of my time is worth so much, so why am I actually like spending so much time looking for a car? Right? Because
you want to get a great deal on a car.
But at the same point in time, like my time's worth more than the look that I'm doing for the car, right? So it's really this transition that I'm having. It's a lot of my inner being that's struggling. But I continue to do it for a couple reasons. One is I have 6 kids.
Okay.
And so I think that I want to make sure that my kids can have at least the similar, if not better life than I gave them.
Okay.
So if I lavish them with all of this goodness, all of this, vacations and fancy cars and, gourmet meals all the time, and any one, if not more of them, would not be able to do that for their own kids. So am I setting a standard that makes them feel lesser as people and parents because of the fact that they can't reach the potential that I can? So I'm very conscious of that because I don't want to set my grandkids up for failure. And I think that grounding my kids in that way makes them more able to associate with people. And as opposed to, the memes that you get of the dad who said every A you get a bottle of Dom Perignon and a Rolex.
Right.
Right. And it's just like, it's so ridiculous. But a lot of it comes from a conversation that I have with all my kids, which I said, there's only like 6 things in life that you need to spend money on. Okay. So it's like food, clothing, shelter. I think I said food, clothing, shelter, entertainment. And that might be all of them. And so the question then becomes like, what do you want? And I talk to all my kids, what do you want? Like you can decide that food is your thing and you can then go to gourmet restaurants and Michelin star and you can do all that stuff, but you might not be able to do the other ones. You can decide that you're a car guy and you could buy all these fancy cars and fix them up and do it as a hobby, but then maybe you can have a really nice house, right? So it's about that balance of what you want to do. And so what I've always talked about with my kids is you can go all the way to one extreme or another. Like on the food, you can plant a garden. You can use your own hands and plant a garden and weed and do all those things and have delicious vegetables, like right from your garden to your plate. But you're gonna do a lot of work and it's very cost effective, but you're gonna work at it to all the way that you can eat out every single day. And you can do things and there's levels of it. I can eat out at Chipotle. I can go to a really fancy sit down and everything in between. And the same thing about cars. Like if my perspective on cars is its real purpose is to get me safely from point A to point B, well, then I diminish all of the extra bells and whistles. And that's why I have that car, is because it continues to get me safely from point A to point B.
And that is your definition of what a car needs to be.
Correct. And so where I do spend money and always have spent money is real estate. So I have a nice house. I could have a nicer house, but I have a nice house.
Right.
Right. And so some people that I know, good friends of mine, they raised 3 and 4 kids in a 1,300 square foot property.
Right.
That's not me. Like I need some space, right? So we've got 4 acres, we've got things to do, and we get to enjoy it, and that's what I wanted to do.
And I'm sure your neighbors are fascinated when they see you pull up to your house in your $650 car.
Probably. Well, they hear it because like my muffler's not working very well at this point.
Right.
No, but yeah, and it's an interesting conversation. And with that said, and I've taught my kids very deliberately that they can have anything they want. They can work as a janitor in a school, and they can have the life that they want. They just have to pick and choose how they do it. And so often nowadays people don't. They want everything. They want the best food and the best clothing and the best entertainment. They want everything. You can't do that. Generally in life, you can't do that. You have to trade off. You have to decide what is not going to be something that you end up doing. And so that's kind of the mentality I've had. But even when COVID was happening, I had very specific conversations with my kids. I said, you are going to experience COVID very differently than the majority of the population. We have a house that has 4 acres. You can go outside and socially distance with anyone you want. And then when the governor indicated that we couldn't have any people over if you have parties greater than 8, and we're 8 total, we ended up going to Puerto Rico for 18 days.
Nice.
Right? Yeah. And the flights were $100 each person round trip. And no one was traveling, so Airbnbs for a 4-bedroom were $150 in Puerto Rico in December.
Right.
And I rented a car. That was like the most expensive thing, I think, was like the car rental.
Yeah.
Then it was the hotel.
Yeah.
Then it was the food. And then it was like the flight was like last.
Right.
I spent like in 18 days with 8 people, I think we spent like $4,000 or $5,000. And so the point is that I was teaching them, you can have anything you want. You just have to be willing to figure it out.
Right.
And that's kind of the lesson I'm trying to teach my kids. And so me spending like crazy and buying fancy cars and going on all these vacations doesn't teach them that lesson.
Right. And it doesn't build the character. It seems like part of building their characters, why you're being intentional about it.
Absolutely.
And that's phenomenal. I mean, I have a ton of respect for that. And it puts things into context so well for me. So,
but that's actually, then we talked about mindset. It's probably the 3rd time, 4th time. But that's my issue right now, though.
Right.
Because now I shouldn't be spending so much time finding a cheap car, because I have enough money and my time is valuable to me. So now I'm in this transition from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
Right.
And so this is like a lot of my play. Like we were talking about, today, before we started recording, that a lot of my issue is I've worked myself out of a job. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm like, well, what do I do? And it's like, but for so long it was like I was the only one that can do it. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a limiting belief. And then when you start to actually train people to be able to do and support you in the ways, you have to continue to level yourself up. And that's the real scary part, is like, I'm relative to the majority of the population, I'm good. But if you want to start judging me against great entrepreneurs, I'm a little child. And so like, how much of it do I want to change me is a lot of it. And that's one of the big ones, scarcity to abundance mindset right now.
And that's the balance you have to strike. I mean, like, I know for myself, someone who I don't really resonate with a ton of his stuff, but there was one thing that I said I saw in myself, and I don't like a lot of the qualities of this person. It's Grant Cardone, and I'm not a huge fan of Grant Cardone.
Sure.
But one of the things that he said is he goes broke every like couple of years, right? Because he just takes everything that he's made and just reinvests it. And I find for me, artificial scarcity means like I've done well, and then I just like I go broke reinvesting it in the next thing. Mm-hmm. And in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, it happens as well, where he's like, you got to burn the bridge behind you, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm at one of those transition phases right now since I sold the landscaping and snow removal piece, where it's like I've got 3 months to figure this out, and really develop a new income stream or a new business model.
Or double down on what you're doing.
Well, yes, but there's other factors that we'll get into as far as like just mental health and burnout and stuff like and influence and reach? Like, how many people can I reasonably reach and influence and help just doing, property managing here in Connecticut?
There's always more.
There's always more.
And so the point is, and like we talked about Alex Hormozy, I don't know if you picked up $100 million offers.
Read it. It's great.
So I'm working a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because you just have to keep going out there and doing more.
And doing
figuring it out.
More volumes, more reps.
More everything.
Right. And so, and so this is kind of, the direction moving forward is there's a huge need for small associations.
Absolutely.
50 units less.
Absolutely.
The economies of scale are not there for managing those associations. So my goal is, how many people can I help nationwide by developing a training program that you can buy for $995?
Nice.
And, teach these people to self-manage and how much money can they save and how much more efficiently can they do it and how much better can they do it than me, because I have 800 units and they're a 28 unit complex. And there are 28 units of the total, but their 28 units are their entire world.
Sure.
And they can give it more time and attention than I can if I just give them the tools to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept what you're saying. I think what you'll find though is people are lazy.
Yes.
They just want an easy button.
Yes, I agree. But that's why we still do this, right? And that's part of me getting the reps in. So it's not like I'm going to get out of property management. It's, I can only do so much, but I can be learning from the accounts that I have and what I am doing to give people better tools in case they want to do it themselves.
So interesting things to kind of piggyback on what you're saying. So I don't like the idea of going national either. Right?
Okay.
So the whole concept of selling a course.
Right.
But I look at myself and I look at what I'm good at and I look at what I like, and I am trying to attract a team that is behind our mission, vision, values.
Right. Yep.
And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this hairy, audacious goal?
Okay.
Right. And the BHAG.
BHAG.
So I, as an entrepreneur, the most beautiful thing is, as Frank Sinatra said, I can do it my way.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. I'll do it my way. And so many people talk about going multi-state, doing this, doing that. And I said, nah, that's not for me.
Interesting.
But what I said was, how do I still get big then? Right? Because it's just like, it's a question of like, do I want to stay small or do I want to continue to grow? And so I said, okay, how do I utilize the tools and resources that I have to do it bigger? So I came up with 3 heads of what I'm trying to accomplish. And any one of them can be huge. So the first is to do local better.
Okay.
So it's figure out systems to grow the company organically so that I increasingly get out of it. But I built a literally a viable, amazing company locally. So that's the first. The second is to consult, right? To help turn around businesses that are not doing it well. If I've kind of cracked the code on property management, I'm pretty sure that if you do property management really well in Connecticut, it's going to replicate in Florida or Texas or anywhere else. And so I can then consult. And in good conscience, I can say, look, I can help you raise your profitability to this. I can help you do your sales marketing to this. I can help you with your operations because I have, right? And in that way, I can basically utilize the success that I have in running my own company as a medium to actually then sell consulting services. I need to go up.
Yeah, just because I don't want you.
Keep hitting it. And the third level of that is syndication, joint venture.
Okay, so partnering.
So whereas I said that I don't want to go run property management companies everywhere, I think that if I'm the owner or partners of mine are the owner, that I can utilize the same systems that I have to be able to do it more cost effective than a local person. Because a lot of what I'm doing is trying to prove out that you really don't need that much local support to be able to run a successal company.
And there's a lot of big companies, even in the HOA space, that are
starting to move that direction. Yes.
And I have a lot of clients that are adamant that they want a local person to be, hands-on and on-site.
Sure. And I'm not saying that you always have to have a local presence.
Right.
But you don't need to have the entirety of your staff be local.
Correct.
So that's basically the thesis that I have. So in our current situation, we have 11 employees and we have 5 local and 6 remote.
Okay.
And if I could snap my fingers and get the perfect ratio, it's probably like 25% local, 75% remote. So I could remove a couple more local and put a couple more remote in.
And that makes sense.
Like me, I haven't been to a unit in a year or two. So I can do that anywhere. I could do that in Puerto Rico. And that's some of the benefit is I was in Puerto Rico and I was working. I didn't have to be here. Right. So I put an hour or two a day and I was able to kind of make sure it was running well. And when I came back, yeah, things were a little worse than they were before I left, but not appreciably. And now, 2-3 years removed from that, it's similar. We'll possibly get there if you want to go there. One of the areas, the reasons why I've done what I've done is my wife kind of challenged me. Mm-hmm. We have our 6 kids. Our oldest is going to be graduating from high school in a little over a year.
Okay.
And my wife talking about these experiential events that occur in people's lives and kind of shape and mold. And thinking about that, the audience, think about it like, how do I provide this experience to my kids, to my wife, to my whoever when I'm around them? It's kind of a beautiful thing. But she wants to have a summer where we drive 6 weeks across the country. How do I do that? So that was some of the questions from like a couple of years ago where it's like, all right, I need to figure this out.
And you did.
Mostly.
Yeah.
I have a few more things that I'd have to do, but it's mostly areas that I really enjoy.
Right.
So it's like, all right, I don't really need to figure it out yet. But I already kind of have thought in my brain, if I snapped my finger and had to do it, like what would I do?
Right.
So.
And I've gotten to the point in the last 6 months where I've been able to do that, but I always come back to it like a mountain of work. Like it's like I can do it, but I can't do it indefinitely.
Yeah.
Right. And there's still some tweaking and stuff like that, but we've been able to get the right people in place where, at least for the client load we have, I can really kind of step away for a week. A couple weeks ago, I went and a buddy of mine was having a midlife crisis. His daughter, who's I think just turned 20, is about to get married.
Oh,
he's like,
it's a good midlife crisis.
Yeah. So, but it's his baby girl, and it's a struggle for him. So he was like, "Hey, let's go out to the West Coast, rent motorcycles, ride from Seattle to San Diego,
nice.
The PCH."
That's awesome.
And it was awesome. And when you're riding a motorcycle, you can't, like when you're in a car, you can take calls and do stuff and still kind of work. On that trip, I really couldn't. And I just was like, all right, guys, I'm trusting you with this. I'll be back in a week. You know what to do. Hold it down.
Nice.
And I would check in, I think twice through the whole week, for 15 minutes. Just, my admin or my assistant would have a list of stuff and what do we do with this? What do we do with this? And just kind of get through it efficiently. And it worked really well, but there was 2 issues. One is it would not work indefinitely. So I couldn't step away from the business for 90 days and still have a business.
Sure.
And 2 was it works at the client load we have. And I love my team.
Sure.
They're great. I'm blessed with the team I have. I don't know that I could find another 5 people that do what they do.
You'd be surprised.
Maybe. But that's my fear is like, as we keep growing, I feel like we're hitting capacity of, if we keep growing with the current model, I'm going to have a very difficult time replicating the same level of efficiency and success that we've had thus far.
And that's mostly your issue. And that's what I was going to say was with the current model.
Right.
I've reorganized my company like 4 times.
Okay.
Right. And so like when you start off, it's just you.
Right.
Right. So in kind of the organizational structure, we would call that a portfolio-based model.
Okay.
So I'm responsible for all aspects of these properties that are part of my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens is now you get a little bigger and you hire a person. And so now what happens is you become what's called a departmental model. Mm. So I have my own portion of the department, I do my things, and then I have someone else doing something different. They have their own responsibilities, I have mine. So it's departments, okay? Then maybe you hire another ancillary person and you have support underneath them. We call that a hybrid. So it's kind of portfolio, it's kind of departmental with certain pieces are pulled off. So those are the 3 major areas that people like kind of talk about. In property management, at least what I do, there's a 4th. It's called pod. So what it is it's basically single person departmental. So I have in my property management company, I have 11 people. I have 18 different roles. And I used to have 2 different pods, but we shrunk a little bit and we went down to 1 pod. And so I have people that know their specific roles and responsibilities and what exactly they need to do. The benefit of the pod as opposed to departmental is in a departmental structure, let's say you have 2 or 3 people that are doing the same role, one can hide, right? Because like the other people pick up the slack. So the lazy one kind of hides a little bit. And then the highest person ends up becoming frustrated. Why do I always have to be the one that does all the work? Why isn't like, and so it can cause a little bit more of toxicity in your culture. And so in a pod, every single person has their own responsibility. They can't hide because if the work stops getting done, we know who to blame.
Right.
And so there's a lot of benefit to pod with scaling because all I have to do is figure out those roles and then I continue. And I need one person over top of these pods. And I don't really, but I generated one person above these who kind of is responsible to communicate with the pod leaders. And we call him the operations leader, operations manager. And he deals with like escalations and things. And then he can deal with probably 5 to 10 pods. And each pod can have 300 people. So I can have a relatively flat process and be able to get all the work done. And it's very scalable because all I have to do is just get another pod. So the thinking behind it is, could you, with your 12 associations, if you, instead of thinking that I'm going to 24, I'm just going to another 12. And then I'm just going to another 12. And then I'm just going to another 12, right? So each one is compartmentalized. And so when I think of it, I don't think I'm running a 3,000 unit company. I'd be running 10 300 unit companies.
And I think the difficulty with that is the margins, as you know, in HOA management are a lot tighter than in your style, right? Now, I know you've found ways to increase efficiency and cost to benefit ratio on your employment end of things. However, I guess the fear is like, okay, let's say I duplicate the team, right, to add the associations, is, then the margins, right, are cut so thin where it's not. My fear is that it's not going to be sustainable. Now I'm sure there's ways to rework it, and probably if I spent my time fixing that issue rather than making podcasts, I'd be able to.
Yeah. So we talk about it. Yeah. So in our industry, and we might have talked about this in passing, but right. it's worth talking about and for your community. Yeah. Every single industry has a certain financial metric which drives everything. Yeah. So a lot of them, like if you're direct to consumer, it's your customer acquisition cost and your the cost of producing the product, right? But it could be like customer lifetime value might be the big one, right? In ours, one of the single biggest ones is the direct labor efficiency ratio, the DLER. So what does that mean? What that means is the people doing the work have a certain cost of labor because our industry is so labor intensive, right? So you have a certain cost of labor, and then you have basically a revenue for that labor cost. So you take your total revenue and you divide it by that direct labor cost, and that becomes a ratio. The closer you are to 1, the worse you are. And so in our industry, like they're trying to do like about a 3 to 1. So what does that mean? That means for every $100 I make of revenue or $300 I make of revenue, I should only have $100 of cost of labor.
Interesting. And that's way out. So mine's probably closer to like 65%.
What?
Or like
a labor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 3 ways that you basically improve your direct labor efficiency. Yeah. And only 3 ways. So the first is raising your revenue. So figuring out creative ways of making more money on the same product that you're providing, right? And some of that could be like customer lifetime value, because you're doing over a long enough duration. But in general, it's how do you add revenue? And so what I would argue with you is you say that they're so pencil thin, but you don't know the people that are doing it well and how they do it. So like after this, we should probably talk about some of the people that in my space that do HOA as well as property management.
Okay.
Because they actually then would be able to give you ideas on how to bring in additional revenue streams. Right. Okay. So that's one, is raise revenue. The second is to reduce your labor cost. That's where me talking about, bringing in people internationally that are a lot more cost effective can be of benefit, right? Because if I have to pay someone here $50,000, but I can pay someone internationally something like $20,000, I can take that $50,000 and I can hire 2.5 people, right, for the same amount. And now, can that 2.5 people do more than that one person? Absolutely. Can one person do what is equivalent to that one person? Maybe, right? Because you can actually get people internationally that have better talent than locally because their cost of labor is significantly lower.
Correct.
So that's the second, is reduce the labor cost. The third is to make your system more efficient so people can do more with less people. So that's the process side.
Right, and that's one area that I've been working on a lot.
Correct. And so if you're doing that, where now your staff can do 14 associations, that all goes to the bottom line because you didn't have an additional staff cost.
Right.
And so at least in our space, they talk about the ratio that you should be looking for is about 75 to 1, 75 units, residential units per one person.
Okay.
And so there's similar metrics for HOA. There's similar metrics for short-term rentals. I don't know them because I'm not in those spaces. HOA is probably like 300 to 1, or 400 or 500 to 1, right? So it's something like that is probably that ratio, that relationship. The other thing, though, so those are some things to know about kind of some of the most important metrics in the property management space. The other thing to know about is that it's about like the efficiency that you have, and the 75 to 1 that I just basically spoke of is an important aspect of it. But that's only the direct labor, right? I'm not direct labor. I'm here talking to you, giving up my time. My business is still running. I'm still paying that direct labor currently. So I'm an overhead labor. What is that? What is the benefit of that? Well, if I'm direct labor, I'm definitely needed for the work that has to be done on an ongoing basis, AKA I can't really go on vacation.
Right.
Whereas if I'm overhead and I'm kind of doing things to make the business better, then I can go on vacation. Just those aspects of improvement of the business suffer while I'm gone, right? So we have a lot of initiatives on like what are the important things that we want to drive forward. A lot of them are sales and marketing. Like honestly, like if I went away and didn't do anything in sales and marketing for 6 weeks, is my business still going to be there in 6 weeks?
Yeah, it's just not going to be improving at the same rate.
Agreed, right? So something will always suffer with it, but the operational side will not suffer. The accounting and financial side hopefully will not suffer. The sales marketing will suffer if that's what I need, if that's the major function that I'm doing. Now, let's say that I even go above that. And let's say that I have managers of each of these individual divisions, which we do. We have operations manager, which is one of our guys. We have a sales and marketing manager. He's the same person, right? Because I don't have enough work for all these different roles. And then we have a finance manager, which is me. And then I go over top of that in the EOS traction vernacular. I'm what's called the integrator. So I kind of figure out what's needed and I kind of make things work. But even that, I ended up hiring a person who I'm teaching to be able to do all of the process improvements, special projects. I'm having him be a project manager so he can make sure that work's getting done. He's been harassing people for getting their videos out recently, and I don't have to worry about it, right? So as I keep doing it and building out these systems, like what am I doing? Now I give someone else that specific task and I keep leveling myself up. Then I either have to find more things to do, right? Because I'm getting rid of all these other things, more value add things like coming on podcasts. Or I start thinking about doing things like secondary businesses, right? Because not really needed that there for 40 hours. So what am I going to do with my other 36? So those are some of the things that you have to think about is, so what are you doing with your other time? Because as you continue to grow business, if it doesn't grow commensurate with you and your growth as a person, you need to figure out that solution. And what do I mean by that? Like, we're built to be 2, 3, 4 times bigger than we are, but we're not. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I don't have as much time demanded of me because things are not breaking as fast as they could be if we were 4 times bigger.
Right. That makes sense. And I think that's where the pain point for me is right now, is we are built at maximum efficiency and we require maximum efficiency to operate. So when things go a little askew, it's me. I've got to go fix it all the time. And it happens because it's like you're pushing it to the limit every day, every week.
Well, That's to some level, what that means is you don't have excess capacity and or you have training problems. And so we have excess capacity. And the benefit of excess capacity is you have people do these projects.
Right.
Like, okay, I need you to build training systems with your extra 2 or 3 hours you have a day, right? And then if they got a busy day, well, they have 2 out of 3 extra hours to attack it.
Right.
So, but that goes back to the real problem, which is you need to figure out how to price better so that you can hire enough people to have the excess capacity to work in your business.
So I like that. And I think my approach or my solution has just been just a different direction in the sense of adding revenue through a higher margin system, through a training module or a course, which may or may not work because you're right, people are lazy, but it is something that we put the initial time into, we put the social media, and then you can sell it infinitely with no additional.
Yeah, but in that regard, you're changing from a HOA company to a software company, which is very different.
Or education.
And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I think it's a fantastic idea to figure out, especially if you have great systems and you have the chops to do it. It will be a distraction. So what I do, which is different, is one of my superpowers is that I'm not creative, right? And so whereas you're trying to figure it out, an ulterior source of revenue, I'm like, I don't know what to do. What do I do then? Okay, well, I'm just going to find the best people I know in the space and ask them what they do. like the person that I could set you up with in a discussion. Yeah, it's a guy that I know in the space that does HOA really well. Okay. Like, how do you do it? Okay. Like, how do you price it? Okay. Like, what if you get pushback? What do you say? Okay. Right. And so you talk to this guy from HOA. Do you think he's gonna be like, oh, I'm not gonna tell you my secrets? He's in California. Right. He has no intention of going to Connecticut. Right. Right. It's the other side of the world. Right. And so like our community, the NARPM community, shares everything. So I bought a couple systems. I network with some of the top property management companies in the country. And so we kind of level each other up. And like, I'm like, what do you guys do? And they're like, this is what I do. And like, why do you do that? And they're like, this is why. And I'm like, that makes sense. Do you know what I'm saying? So the fact that I'm not creative allows me to not reinvent the wheel. Now I'm great at some things like world-class, even in excess of them, like on the accounting side, the financial side. But like a lot of the other stuff, they're so much better than me. Right. And that's true to any business is you'll have your strengths and you'll have your weaknesses. You want to work on improving your strengths and improving your weaknesses. Now, some people would say, don't work on your weaknesses, just hire or pay someone to do it. Right. I've always been of the mentality to just basically, become well-rounded. But if you want to make more money, you should be a specialist. So, but because I wasn't creative, I never tried to like reinvent the wheel and like come up with some new strategy for pricing, residential property management. So in the same way, if really that's the real challenge, to me, I wouldn't say you're coming at it wrong, but you're coming at it from a perspective that I think you could do differently. Have a single conversation with some of these guys that I know, ask them how they price, ask them their margins, ask them like their utilization, how many people they need, and then like you will legitimately probably raise your profit margin by 10 to 20%. But it's relatively simple, and for me, it's obvious because I've done it a long time, and it's because I'm not creative. If I had to like be the first person to make fire, like I'm starving, right? I'm just going to starve because I'm not that good at it, right? Right. I'm resourceful. I can pick berries really well, but like cooking meat wouldn't happen for me, right? So and just recognizing though that where you are, like it's all a gift, right? Just lean into whatever it is that you're not good at in a way that makes sense. Some people are like, I want to do this, this, and this. I'm like, go do it. Go like change the world. Like I'm just going to make incremental improvements all the time. Right.
And I think that is part of it's a blessing and it can be a distraction is that I am very creative.
Sure.
Like I had no experience in HOA management.
Sure.
And that was the benefit to that was that we approach it fundamentally different than a lot of the other, like all of the other HOA management companies, you can tell that they've, their managing members have all worked at each other's companies because they all kind of do things very similarly. And then there's us, and we do things very differently. And our clients, by and large, love it because it's just so different than what everybody else is doing. But that's a product of I had no clue what I was doing, and I just had to figure it out. And I put together my solutions, and in some ways, they work really, really well. And I think in the consumer client experience side, our model makes people really happy, and that's a testament to the fact that nobody wants to leave.
Yeah.
But the problem is the efficiency side, because we didn't learn our system from another company and we're still figuring it out.
Sure.
It's like, okay, there's some areas, obviously they've been in business a long time, they've been doing it a long time, where we missed the boat on their strategies.
Sure.
Because we just...
Yeah, and like I said, there's a benefit to that and a curse. And the benefit of it is you're providing a different world-class experience. The curse is their profit margins are probably higher than yours.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what I will say about all of that, and which is interesting to me, is I used to, when I was an engineer, one of the things I hated was bureaucracy. I'm like, oh, I can't stand the bureaucracy. It's so ridiculous. Then you become the owner.
Right.
And then you start realizing why the bureaucracy occurs, right? Because like you can't have a team of people that are just like killers. Like you just can't, right? You need to put structure around people because some people are going to be average at what they're doing or, average at a portion of what they're doing. And so in that regards, I became the bureaucracy. And so like, doesn't mean I like it. It means, and it also means that I don't have to like willingly just go into what everyone else does. But I'm going to make the conscious choice of understanding it and then picking and choosing the things that I want to use of the bureaucracy in the business that I'm performing. So what I would say is to you is you may have to make some changes to your structure for good reasons.
Right.
And don't like beat yourself up. Just take the good parts that make you guys unique and then utilize the parts that you've now realized why they do it the way they do it.
Right.
And be willing to make the change and adapt. And that's what I do. It's not about revolutionary change. It's about incremental improvement, right? Lots of incremental steps. And in some regards, you can become that specific change. Like it's like even like Elon Musk, like people were making electric cars, right? They weren't making it to the same level. And a lot of his was like, okay, this whole concept of making all these small parts that I have to screw in is kind of crazy. So let's do these injection molding devices and kind of just piece them together, right? But it was, kind of coming at one piece of the car making process in a different way. And that's a lot what I do, right? So it's like we ended up making a modification here to how we do business and here, but we're incrementally building that knowledge, not trying to revolutionize it. So, if you are struggling in one of these other areas, I'd say you probably want to like talk to some of them and understand why they do it that way, why they don't think your way will work, be receptive to the feedback, and then choose to do what you want or not.
Yeah, I would love that, and I appreciate you offering that connection, and I will, most likely take you up on that, and I really do appreciate that, and that's kind of part of the reason why, I wanted to have you on this podcast and why I value the relationship, because I know you've been doing it a long time, and the way your brain processes information is a lot different than mine, and there's a huge benefit to that.
Absolutely. And this is going back to masterminding, and you should try to find a good mastermind too. Like these guys are like some of the top performing, if not the top, like top performing property management companies in the country. Mm-hmm. And I get to chat with them. And I get to be like, you're an idiot for this reason because it's my superpower. And they're like, you're an idiot in this reason, right? Because they're great at like culture. They're great at like making people feel like connected. So like one of the questions I asked a bunch of successful companies or company owners, I said, if you were in a situation where someone pulled a gun on you, how many of your employees would run towards you and how many of them would run away from you? How many people would take a bullet for you?
Right.
And I looked at my side and I said, that's pretty easy, 0. And then I started talking to some of these guys, and like I have a friend here who runs a very successful company, and he started going like this. And he got up to like 9.
Yeah.
9 people. And it's like, but my brain is cerebral. I'm not a people person. I'm like, it's process, it's that. And so many of these other great company owners, they're all about people and building into people and the relationships and stuff. And I talked to my other buddy who's an engineer, and then he became property manager, and he's like, yeah, I'm at 0 as well. And it's how we work differently. Now we attack problems differently, but that's why like you take my best principles and practices about process, about, financial stuff, and now you roll it into your own model of people, and like you'll be doing better, right? And so it's more like I don't do the people as naturally as you and others, but I do the process, I do the financial way better than you do.
Right.
And it's just we're different people.
Right.
And understanding that, and then trying to bring in some of those people that can complement you is really important.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because that is the title of this episode, is complementary.
Nice.
Because our companies are complementary, and I just wanted to point that out because
That's great.
Theme came up, which is always good. It means we're doing our job. No, I appreciate that, and I think that is, now that I'm getting to the place where I'm not swinging the hammer as much anymore. Even though when you pulled in, you saw me in the wheel loader.
Yeah.
Hey,
it's a fun toy.
It's a fun toy. But even though I don't have to swing the hammer as much, I don't have to be on site as much. We're getting kind of the back end of this new, and I do, when we talk about envisioning the life we want to have and then putting the piece in place along those lines.
Sure.
This kind of stuff I love. Podcasting, sharing content, sharing the stuff, you know, and I even found out I hate talking at a camera. Like really? I sound so weird in podcasting, and that's why I was like, I need to do a podcast, because this feels natural to me. Sure. And I love this. And this conversation we've had is like way better than any video I've ever made.
Good.
Just talking at a camera, because it's just not my thing. Sure. Right. But when I talk about, what is the life I want to have, and even my training module, we've been recording it, and one of my admin, my assistant, she's relatively new to the company, so I'm kind of like killing two birds with one stone. She's the person who I'm training in this stuff. Nice. And so it's like, and we're recording it, so then other people just see how I'm training her. Nice. And it makes it much more authentic and natural, because I'm actually doing the thing with another person, which I'm going to do a lot better than if I was just, talking to an imaginary viewer.
What's crazy is what you're talking about now is already going to separate you from the vast majority of your competitors. Like, I'm doing the same thing, working on training systems, working on like a lot of Loom videos and things like that. And you don't know how many even high performing property management companies, it's all like tribal knowledge. Right. They don't have a culture of continuous improvement and training systems and all that stuff. And like, that's like literally what we're doing right now, is trying to get everything, every specific task, and have a quick video, a minute, 2 minutes. Right. This is how you do it. Yeah. And then when you bring a person in, you don't have to teach them. You just take a look at the video. And if it doesn't work, let us know. And then we're going to teach you how to do it. And then we're going to have you make a video.
That's great. Yeah. I like that. I like, because it solidifies it, and then they have to own it, because they got to make a video on it. Yep.
I would say that teach your assistant and have her make videos.
Oh, she's going to hate me, but she might actually like it. I don't know.
Yeah, some people love it. Like, it's just, like, I hate it, but some people love it.
Yeah. She wasn't thrilled. I mean, she does it, but I don't think, I'll have to ask her. I'll find out.
And that goes back to something else, because, the fact that you don't know for sure. Yeah. You don't ever want to, if you want to run a successful company, you don't ever want to put people into positions of things they hate. So that's a lot of it when you talk about, if you want to get more out of people, you need to put them into places of things that they want to do and they like doing. So it's a lot of it when you're doing your hiring, it's like culture, but then it's about like, what does the job actually entail on an ongoing day in and day out basis? And my hiring is like, and I literally tell people this every single time. I say, life is too short to work at a job that you don't like. So like, I'm going to tell you, I'll be brutally honest about like what the job is. Yeah. And if you like it, awesome. And if you don't like it, I don't really want to hire you. And it's not because of the fact that I don't like you or anything else. I don't want you to be doing something just for money. Right. I want you to do it because you love it, because life's too short to do stuff just for money. Correct. And that's a lot of it about the self-improvement, the things that we're on. Like there's more to life. And that's a lot of the culture that I'm trying to build.
And that right there. So when I say I don't know if she'd like it yet, she's young. She's 19. She's a little shy. I've been trying to recruit her since she was 14. Nice. Because she is very smart, very capable, and she does the job phenomenally. Awesome. Right? But she's a little shy in front of the camera, and it's just that piece of it. Even though she does very well, And especially when we're working together, she likes to chastise me and,
That's great.
right. And,
That's amazing. I wish my people would do that more.
right. And we have a good relationship and she is effective. But one of the things, part of this training program, and I think that the secret sauce that I'm injecting into it, because there's the black and white of just, how do you do the job, which anybody can teach you how to run the software or do the job or whatever.
Sure.
But the secret sauce I'm injecting is actually the recommended reading list, which is a lot of stuff like Think and Grow Rich, leadership strategy and tactics, 7 habits of highly effective, and all this stuff. And that's part of the recommended reading. So she's coming back having if not read these books, at the very least done the Spark Notes. And as she's going through this, she's like, I'm really understanding you more. I'm really starting to, as someone who didn't do any of that self-help or business improvement or any of that stuff, it's shifting the mindset. And she's like, that at the beginning of this, she was just like, all right, fine. You're paying me to do this. I will be your little, dummy guinea pig that you're going to teach to do. And as the course is going on, she's like, man, this stuff's really cool.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize that when you say start with the end in mind, like thought it was just some cheesy thing you said, but now I've read this book and now it's like, when you ask me like, how much do you want to make and what's the lifestyle you want to lead? And she doesn't have an answer for me. She reads the book and she's like, now I realize why that answer is important.
Sure.
And why I need to think about
it. Because they're talking about today. It's a plan is nothing. It's the planning that's everything, right? Because a plan will go to crap.
Right.
But the process of planning, the process of thinking about it, is everything. And so that's a lot of where I am, because if you think about it, 10 years ago, I had 3 kids, worked as an engineer.
Yeah.
Had maybe just started purchasing my first property. 10 years later, got a daughter that's almost out of high school. Mm-hmm. I run a very successful property management company. I own a lot of rentals. Mm-hmm. I'm being kind of groomed in some ways to become a top property management company in the country and do speaking engagements and things like that. And so it's like, what is 10 more years going to look like?
It's going to be wild. Can't even imagine it.
You can't. And the thing about it is you're limiting your mindset. So now I'm starting to talk about bigger numbers and bigger ideas and how am I going to do this? And so when you have set big goals as a kid, you reach them and you're like,
and he set bigger goals.
Yeah. Do you set bigger goals? Right. It's even like the Alex Hormozy thing. I was talking about it recently. I was like, I had a midlife crisis and I was like, I hit my goal at the age of 40 and I was like, I can retire, but I'm just gonna be bored. And that was never really the intention to retire. It's just I want to get there. Right. So I was like, all right, bigger goal. But it's such a cop out because it's like, oh, you just do bigger goal to bigger goal for no reason, right? At what point at what point is enough? And that's always the question that I would have for Alex and everything else. But I know their answer. Their answer would be, it's about the game.
Yeah.
It's not about.
It's about the game.
It's not growth. It's not about the money. It's not about any of that other stuff. It's just about enjoying the game, being on a game that you love to play and you want to continue playing.
Sure. And he even says it. He's like, how does it? People ask him how he's feel to have made it, and he's like, dude, I've just gone from being a small fish in this pond to being a small fish in a bigger pond.
Sure. That's exactly correct. Because you think about it, there's only a few people that are like big fishes. It's Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Musk.
And I'm sure that the circles they're running or they're aspiring to, it's probably they're small fish in whether it's a spiritual path or whatever, something,
Sure.
They might have the money for it, but there's something in their life that's missing that they're aspiring towards that in whatever that context is.
Well, and that's the thing about it is it's they just have bigger whys than us, right? Elon Musk wants to fix the world, colonize Mars, and get rid of global warming. That's his why, right? Yeah. It's crazy, right? It's big. And Jeff Bezos, it's all about obsession of customer, right? And now he's dropping off medicine from drones, and you'll get it within 60 minutes. They're just obsessed about better. And if you do that, and you can kind of stick at it long enough, you're unstoppable, right? So it's all of that, but it's all about it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of pain. Are you willing to lean into the pain, or are you going to avoid it? Ultimately, and that's where me not having a chip on my shoulder hurts because I don't have something that's going to drive me to a level that is beyond what those great people are. Like, do I really want to do what is necessary?
It's another good Alex Hormozy line, right? Do what's required. Not try your best, do what's required.
Sure.
No, so that actually, you've segued into one of the questions, and we've actually entirely skipped over one of them that's important, but we'll tie them up at the end. But this segues into the question of pain, and this business can be a very painful business. It started for me on Thursday night. I had an annual meeting with a new complex,
Sure.
very luxury complex, 70 units, beautiful. And the previous property manager under budgeted the annual budget by $100,000 2 years in a row, and just been pulling from. And so I'm running the numbers, and I'm like, there's just $100,000 per year missing out of the budget. Like, it's just, he didn't calculate enough. So I've got to be the one to come in after taking over a month ago and say, we've got to raise your dues by $100 a month to make up the shortfall, right?
Sure.
And there's a $2 million settlement, and it's down to $100,000. And a lot of people are asking where the money's went. And it's like all this stuff, and they just left this situation. And now, like, I'm here picking up the pieces. So the annual meeting was Thursday. It was fraught with contention, a lot of stuff directed, past board and stuff like that. And I'm just here, running the meeting. I got a lot of compliments afterwards of how well I handled everything. Sure. But it was just like, oh, that was rough. Sure. And then, the following day, it was an anniversary party for a friend of ours that has cancer, and it might be her last. And so, I was trying to make a brisket for this party and stuff like that. And I woke up and, my temps had gone off overnight. My alarm didn't go. So the brisket's a meteorite, and it's raining, and I'd blocked the day off to just do, to get ready for this party and help my friends out and stuff like that. And we had emergency water entries on 3 different properties. I had, I think, 39 maintenance requests on Friday alone. 2 of my main staff members had off, and the third one was already committed on a project. So it was just, it was a day of crap. And it just kind of started Thursday night, and it rolled through Friday. And there were moments on Friday where I just wanted to, like, cry and, be like, I'm going to close up shop, and you guys can all figure it out on your own, because obviously you guys don't appreciate what I do. Sure. And just, this whole pity party thing. Sure. Saturday morning, woke up still with that kind of emotional hangover, but like, all right, let's just, put one foot in front of the other. And now by Monday, today, it's like back to being motivated to, okay, how can we do better? But it was a dark few days. Sure. And it was just a lot of stress, a lot of issues. I think we got like 60 maintenance requests over the weekend, and it's just, this stuff ebbs and flows, right? And it's just everything hit at the worst possible time. And I've been super lucky that, we haven't had a day like, this was top 3 worst days since we opened up shop 4 years ago, or worst periods. And, I guess the question for you is, how do you manage those painful situations, and how do you protect yourself or set up systems? Because I know you're a systems guy. What systems do you have in place to protect yourself from the emotional burnout that can happen in this line of work?
So you're exactly right. And I know of a number of property management companies that are quitting now because they're just so tired. And so my brother said to me when I started this company, he goes, if it doesn't seem like you're drinking out of a garden hose or a fire hydrant, you're not trying hard enough. So what does that mean? What that means is, like, with chaos, it's fight or flight. Yeah. Right. And it's about recognizing it is what it is. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to reduce your stress long-term, because you're going to establish strategies, but also your tolerance towards stress is going to increase. So I remember very, very much, and I think we talked about it, like if you make it the first couple of years, you're going to make it. I remember, like, dry heaving in the morning and stuff, because my anxiety, I was like, oh, I'm going to lose everything. Like, I remember those days very vividly, right? And all entrepreneurs have similar, I think, experiences where nothing ever goes perfect. more often than not, it doesn't go well. What I do about it is a few things. One, anxiety fuels me. I think that all emotions are a blessing. Depression, anxiety, it's your body's way of telling you something. And so for me, anxiety, I hate being anxious. And so I do everything in my power to not be anxious. And so like when an employee quits, I build an employee hiring process. So when I'm worried about someone leaving, I build out training systems so that if they leave, I bring someone in and it doesn't hurt very much. So I think that the concept is just for me, I lean into systems, right? Maybe I lean into people. I lean into building teams that want to die for you and that are going to rally around you when this event occurs, right? So it really depends on, what you're trying to accomplish. But, there is tons of stress. And I think that's where profit comes in too. You got to get to a point where, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because if it's not worth it, then you're going to do a subpar job or you're going to flame out or whatever else. And so a lot of it's just making sure that you're in it for the right reasons when your head's good. One of the things that I do also is I haven't taken it out in a while, but I wrote a 1-page document, which is when I was having a shitty day, it would be things that remind me of why I was in this business. But some of it's like, if everything was easy, no one would ever need me. Right? Like this pain that I'm experiencing for these owners and helping them get through this problem is why I'm valuable. And I'm here to serve, right? Like I'm here to serve. Like I don't know how I couldn't be serving more at this moment, right? Like with all of these issues coming up, right? I'm making them be able to have a good experience because of the fact that I'm serving them well. So like a lot of it's perspective, a lot of it's mentality, a lot of it is then figuring out what of the things that happen could be learning lessons that you can lessen through, coming up with emergency maintenance people. Like maybe that's one of the things you can do is double down on your vendor networks and say, okay, well, I didn't have enough, so I need to get more, right? So like, what's the lesson that if you know that this was going to happen in a week, that you could have done something to prepare, right? And those are the things that you can do to continuously improve. And then when it happens, well, now you don't have as much stress. But something else bigger is going to happen, and then you have more stress, right? So, and that's the continual growth of this business. But I always think back that if it was easy, everyone would do it, and then I wouldn't be able to have this life, right? So the pain is for lack of a better word, it is what we need to do to be able to successfully run a company.
I like that, and. I resonate with, especially where you started off, is anxiety fuels me, right? Pain is a big driver for me. And I intentionally put myself I intentionally bite off more than I can chew and to create this anxiety that drives me to go solve the problem.
Sure, that's your chip on your shoulder.
Right. And so, and for the most part, I'm comfortable with the anxiety. I think during this period, it just was overwhelming, right?
What I will tell you is, you need to. So it's a couple things. One, it's lonely on top, but you knew that.
Yeah.
But the other second thing is like getting people that can take some of the stress away from you, like a partner. So like my daughter started dating recently, and my wife was freaking out. I got to meet this guy. I'm like, so she ended up going out of her way to like meet this kid. And I'm like, well, if she's now comfortable with him, like I don't even worry about that. Like I don't even need to have any of the stress. Like she took on the stress of this situation from me, right? Because if she's now comfortable after meeting him, well then should I have to go out of my way to now interview him as well?
No.
So it's like whoever is the one that's the most stressed and take on the most stress, like the other person can kind of just do a little bit. So having teams that can do that is helpful. But what you are going to need to have happen is a recognition about giving up more, because you need to lean into the stress even more. Why do I say that? If you take this stress and you're like, oh, and like, oh, no one else can do it, then you're always going to be the micromanager of every specific situation. You're going to have more stress as you have more employees, because you're never going to know that they're doing what they need to do to make it run successfully, right? Like scaling and continuing to scale is very difficult if you can't get your stress controlled, because most people, when they get in that stressful situation, they roll up their sleeves and they go to work. But when they go to work, they're actually undoing all of the benefit that they had from previously, because now what they're saying to their guys is, I don't trust you to do it right when the going gets tough.
Right.
So I would caution you that as you scale, you do certain things where you just teach them. It's like a children. You teach them, and then you say, this needs to happen, and you let them do it. And then you say, how did that go? As opposed to like trying to get into it. Right. And so like, that doesn't mean I'm perfect at it, because I have the same things, right, that end up inevitably occurring. But growing companies, you can't leverage yourself if you can't rely on people to be able to do the work without you. And I just worry about you with what you're saying, because you still haven't grown to a big enough scale where you're not heavily involved in every little decision, every little day-to-day, every little aspect, because you're not going to be able to get to a level that would allow you to get,
right.
And
one piece that I forgot to mention in that whole thing was that we have a work phone, work cell phone. It's our main line. Right?
Sure.
And my assistant has that all
Good.
the time. But when she was having company over from internationally, and when the poop started to hit the fan on Friday morning, she's like, I can't do this today. I have plans with these people, whatever.
Sure.
I need you to take the phone.
Sure.
And we joke about it, because we know that phone is like the hot potato. That's just like, it is the drama line, right? And I think part of what happened is, since she's had that phone, and she does a great job with it, and she's able to relieve a lot of that stress for me.
Good.
But when it was already bad from the night before, and that was her first meeting, or annual meeting, that she was taking notes for and observing. And so I think she got stressed out by that. Things started to roll in Friday morning. She had other stuff going on. She was like, hey, listen, I need you to take this phone today. And she's had the phone for 4 or 5 months now. So it's like, okay, let me do you a solid. I'll hold the phone for this weekend. And part of it is, it really made me appreciate what she does, but it also was it was like a perfect storm of taking back this responsibility for a few days to help her out, which helps on the people side of things, right? Because I know, most of everybody except my bookkeeper, because she works remotely and I rarely see her that often, but everybody else I feel would take a bullet for me, right?
Good.
If there's someone with a gun, right? And part of it is those types of things, like, hey, I know you're going through it right now. I'll hold the phone for you for this weekend. But the tax was my own sanity.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this is my problem too, is because I want, as a business owner, to allow my people to have nights and weekends off. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's really important for them to have balance, work-life balance, because I don't want to burn them out.
Right.
But in doing so, you kind of are always on nights and weekends.
Right.
And so it's burning you out.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that could have been is you have a situation where every different person is on a different day of the week. Because then you know that while it's bad, this is my one day of the week. Right? So things like that could be like when you do your debrief or whatever, it's like, okay, well, everyone gets the phone a different day. Bring me on if you need to, but I trust you guys enough to deal with it and try to deal with whatever has to be done now, but alleviate everything to try to move it to Monday. That we can all triage together. Just make sure there's nothing that like is going to make things worse, and then just let them know, hey, look, this is not an emergency. It can wait till Monday. There's very little in our business that's truly an emergency. Like,
that's
we
true.
had someone that called recently that they had not drywall. It was the old. Instead of when people used to do drywall, they used to do, I can't remember what it's called anymore. The plaster. So it was a plaster ceiling.
Yep.
And they just eventually give out.
Right.
And it fell and ended it. And so we're like, is it wet? Nope. Okay. Well, it can obviously wait till Monday.
Right.
But like this person thinks, oh, my whole ceiling is falling apart. I'm gonna die in my sleep. Right. Like something like that. Right.
Right.
So, But like, so a lot of it's just alleviating them that, hey, we'll deal with it on Monday and we'll get to a point where it's good. But I think that, I'm the same way. If I had it where I'm on this weekend, I'm going to be checking my phone more often and I'm going to be on top of it. And then I'm not really, it's when you feel like you're going to do something different and then the shit hits the fan and then you have to like change course. That's the stressful part. But if you know, like, look, I'm not going to plan anything. I'm going to lay low. I'm going to watch football. I'm going to be on and ready. It doesn't matter as much. So it's the reframing of the narrative of, when that happens, don't take on anything crazy. You'll do better if you kind of think about it that way.
I like that. And I think that was, I think that's a good component of it because it was a day that I needed the day off,
Because the brisket and everything else.
Right. And it was just like
Slammed.
Right. So, no, I definitely like that and I appreciate that. And to your point, whenever possible, like I certainly I'm actively always fighting against decision fatigue. So there's a lot of times where if I don't immediately, like if there's not immediately a clear, better solution, I say, what do you recommend? Or I trust your judgment. If it's something that's like low to mid importance, I just say, I trust your judgment, figure it out and let me know what you did.
Sure.
And then usually it works out really well because I trust my people.
Yeah. And we talk about that too, a couple different things. So some property management companies have like a threshold, like you have as long as you're not giving away more than $500, just do it. Right. Cause it's like, do you want to do it for every $5? There has to be a threshold. So that's one thing. And then there's a book that I read about coaching. It's like, and you can ask the questions like, what is the problem for you? Like, what is the problem? Could be, all right, I'm going to help answer the question, but like, what is the problem for you in essentially answering it yourself? And they talk about coaching for development or coaching for performance. So performance is like, I need to perform this function right now. And then coaching for development is, okay, we want to basically have you in similar situations make the right decision.
Right.
So it's a different way that you talk about the physical problem. We used to talk about it all the time as an engineer. You never would want to throw a problem over a wall without 2 or 3 solutions, right? Because then it's just like crappy. It's like, I just made this big issue for you and I have no idea how to solve it.
Correct.
So like, so often people they like to throw bombs over the wall without any idea on how to fix it. And that's always a problem. And it's life. And so it's a lot of it's just coaching and developing your people and trying to help them realize, look, I'm going to help you make you better by helping you come up with frameworks to do decision making.
Right.
And it's super hard and it's super like labor intensive and building into people. And like, I'm not good at it. You're probably good at it because you're more of a people person. But like, each of us, you probably envy me for my chops on financials, right? And I envy you on your people chops. This is exactly like the yin and the yang of these type of situations. But, this game is hard. And I always try to remember that when I'm having a tough day, I'm protecting my owner from having that tough day.
That is great. I like that. You're doing it on behalf of someone else. And it's a lot easier to do it when your why is I'm doing it to benefit this other person. Yeah.
Going back to the Christianity part, like I quit my job as an engineer because I was feeling like exploitative instead of serving. So we were going through bankruptcy and stuff, and it was more about we need to monetize our customers more. We need to monetize. And so like I was like looking at it and I was like, there's no better way to serve than in property management.
That's
I mean, you could say like concierge or whatever else, but no, because concierge is like a short-term relationship. These are year-long, multi-year, decade relationships that you're fostering with vendors, with residents, with owners. Like, it's more than just, let me go get your car, right? And like singular experiences.
Right.
Because they have memories over how things have been before. And so I said to myself, I get to learn how to serve like Jesus. And it was really good because it was humbling for me how much I fail at serving, because I get frustrated, I get angry, I get, all of the normal emotions that you get. Like, why are you complaining about this plaster falling off your ceiling when it's not really an issue? It's an issue for her.
Right.
It's a big issue for her. And recognizing that it's a big issue for her, even though if it's not a big issue for you, you can't diminish and downplay. And this is why I wrote an article recently about perception versus reality. In our business, and even in the thing that you talked about with respect to your group of people that have an underfunded account.
Right.
I'm going to go into two places with this. The first was about a new CEO. He said, the old CEO left and said, when you get into a problem, take the first letter out of my desk, open it up and read it. So he gets into a first bit of problem. And he goes, blame me. The old CEO screwed up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the example with you. You cast some blame on them. If they truly screwed up, you say, look, unfortunately, we noticed irregularity. I don't ever like to talk bad about people, but it looks like they didn't do it correctly. I'm sorry, but that's past. We have to move forward.
Right.
They said the next time it goes in and you have a next problem, then read the note again. Reorganize. Do something to change, okay? And then the third note was write 3 notes. So at that point, you're going to get fired, and stuff.
Right.
And, because if you can't blame the guy and you can't do it through reorganization, well, then it's you, right? So if you look at companies, they're always going to blame the predecessor. Then they're going to blame it. So that was an interesting thing that I noticed. But on the perception versus reality side, because I want to go there, it's always interesting to me. I formulated this kind of thought experiment. And what it was if you have a tenant that says, my refrigerator's broken, my food is thawing, I'm gonna have to throw it all away, I need a new refrigerator right now. If you get it to them tomorrow, are they gonna be happy? No, because they want it today. They had to throw away some food. But if in that same situation, you got it to them 3 days from now, but you explained how you had to move mountains to get them that refrigerator, you had to get a vendor to go over to Home Depot with their truck to get it. Like, I called a bunch of other people. He was the only one available. I called in favors and I got you it. Even though it's later, they're thanking you. In the first one, you gave better service. But in the second one, the perception is that you gave better service because you ended up having to move mountains.
Right.
So a lot of the things that I'm realizing now as it relates to these groups, with owners and this recognition is that in reality, as long as they perceive you as doing a good job, you don't even have to do a good job. The perception is greater than the reality. And so, going to the Alex Hormozy discussion, I posted this on Facebook recently where I said, your value minus your cost, that's your goodwill, right? Because if you cost more than the value you're providing, they're going to get rid of you. Right? But if your value is greater than your cost, you have goodwill. If you raise your prices, so your cost goes up.
You lower your goodwill.
You lower your goodwill, and if it gets to a point where they think that your goodwill is, or where your cost is more than your value that you're providing, they're going to fire you. Right?
And it's perceived.
It's not really the value, it's the perception of the value. My brother used to talk about it all the time. He used to say, look, he goes, and I used to say, it's like, so when you make what you do look easy, the perception is, why do I need a property manager? It's so easy, right? So like a lot of the work that I do with my employees is I talk about how you have to force goodwill.
One moment. So as you were saying.
So the perception of value is so important versus the true value. And so as long as you get the goodwill, essentially. So if I don't charge them any more money on a monthly basis, but I give them updates, even things like, there's nothing to tell you, everything's working well. Like they perceive you as being more valuable. So like some of the things that we're thinking about doing is like a monthly newsletter. Some of it's going to be like, here's 5-star reviews that we've gotten recently. Why? Is it because I need to toot my own horn? No, it's because sometimes through the grapevine or vice versa, you get a tenant that reaches out to an owner and says, I've called them, they've never reached out to me. And so if you have one that says, oh, they're always so responsive, then it's probably a lie from the resident who's just trying to get something off you. And then like a horror story. Because even if an owner's having everything going well, if they know that certain horror stories that we've gotten, then they know that they just got lucky so far and that we're still handling these type of issues really well. And or I think 1-star reviews are actually great to share with owners. Because I think with very few exceptions, I actually think 1-star reviews are better than 5-star reviews. I get 1-star reviews because our screening criteria is too strict. So an owner is going to see that and say, wow, they're getting 1-star reviews because they mandate that bank statements and all these other stuff. Like that's too obtrusive or intrusive. No, it's what I need to do because the situation in the world is right now that people are fraudulently putting together documents.
So it's not the stars, it's what are the reviews, what's the content of the reviews themselves.
Yeah, so I turn every 1-star review into a 5-star review because any owner that's going to do it is going to look at your 1-stars. Right? They're not going to look at your 5 stars.
Right.
I mean, if you look for, you're trying to buy a product, you don't go, how great is this? You might look at a couple of 5. You're like, let me see all the crappy ones.
Yeah, you're right. I do that.
Yeah, and so everyone does it. So you want your 1-stars to become 5-star reviews.
And
So
what if you just have 5 stars?
well, then you respond in good ways, thanking them, talking about your culture, talking about whatever. But the whole point going back to is perception versus reality, right? So my brother would lose business because he made it look too easy.
Right.
So what did he do wrong? And this is the situation is the perceived value is less than his true value. So you never want your perceived value to be less than your true value because that means you're not getting the goodwill. You're making it look too easy. And then if you raise your prices, well, why am I giving it to him? It's so easy. So it's funny, right? So we talked about it. Bad property management companies make the perceived value to be higher than the true value. Oh, this tenant has this does this. That's like, look at how much they're doing for me. They're just handling the situation really poorly, but it makes the perceived value look higher than the true value. And so then you can actually charge more because you're dealing with more fires and headaches. Now, I think that there is some normalization of that. Like, why is it that a person says, I want an appliance today and thinks that's a reasonable request? Well, because Amazon can do it. They're a global company. You're local. Why can't you deliver this refrigerator within 2 hours? Like you have a truck. Go into truck, go to Home Depot, purchase said appliance, put into truck, drive to me with 2 guys, take off truck, put in, take appliance in, put to dump. It's simple. Amazon can do it. Why can't you? So I think that, as the world gets more like good at efficiency and things, you get less benefit of the doubt. I mean, you think about like right now is when before there was like email and text, it was a lot more like these relationships and stuff that you'd have to do for like selling property. But people didn't expect that you could get a house under contract in less than 24 hours. But like some of the world and the efficiency that occurs, the perception changes. And so I think that there is a normalization of perception eventually based on the world. But I think that so many property management companies, and just advice for you is make sure that you get the goodwill. Make sure that you get the perceived value to be correct. Like the things that happened, you should be writing a newsletter to everybody. This happened this weekend. This is what we did, right? This is what we did on our off day. I took my brisket and I screwed it up because I had to serve my communities.
Right.
Now you get goodwill. Because in reality, while you didn't provide that value to everyone else, in reality you did, because what you did was you said, in a similar situation in your community, this is what I'm going to do. And so that the whole thing with Alex Hormozy was you always want your cost to be less than the perceived value.
And his thing is increasing the perceived value.
Always increase the perceived value. But then you have the ability to raise your prices.
Right.
Right? So you talk about it, it's like you're like, oh, I got skinny margins. Well, you have skinny margins for one of 2 reasons. The goodwill that you have is low, aka your perceived value relative to your cost. That difference is low. Or you just haven't priced it appropriately.
So I think that part of it is I haven't priced it appropriately. I was competitive on price for the first few years. Mm-hmm. And so there's that component. And I think that there's actually a good amount of goodwill that I'm starting to cash in on. I think the other piece is that and you've mentioned this before, the industry price point is low for a couple of reasons. So, at the normal rates that people are charging per unit per month for HOA management, the margins are super thin if you intend on doing a great job. Okay, full stop.
Sure.
The way people are competitive in this market come from a couple different things. At least what I've seen, my observations from when I get handed the book from or files or whatever from previous management companies. One of two things has happened. Either they are creating margins by having overloading managers with so many units that they can't reasonably respond to all the requests, and so people are waiting 2 months for a callback and stuff like that. That happens, right? And it's just a volume, right? And I won't name names, but there's certain companies that's their model. And then the other component is either hidden costs or making money on contracts, where they're not supposed to be, but nobody knows. Just charging more for, like, I can't tell you how many like contractors in the last month have just made it like, hey, you know, I'm going to give you the bid for this roof, but you know, what do you want your portion to be? It's
very funny, right?
Like,
but it's how the world works, right? It's how that game is played.
Right.
I think the point is, though, don't hide it, right? So like we make money on vendors that give us a maintenance fee, right? So but you have to recognize, even in the same regards, it's the perception. So if the perception is that the vendor's just going to upcharge at 10% and give it back to you, well, that's not cool. If the perception is this vendor now doesn't have to do as much of their own marketing to get the work to keep themselves fully utilized, well, then they can give you something like a 10% payment, because of the fact that you're reducing their marketing spend. But that should be coming out of them, not coming out of your owner, right? So it's like one of those things where you have to ask the question, and it's very simple to do. You just get multiple quotes. Right? Like, because if people are playing the game where, hey, I'll do this, like, don't look at anyone else. You still be competitive based on, you know, capitalism, and just get multiple quotes, and then pull the lowest people down, level load them appropriately, and you're fine.
Yeah. So what I've done is, and so I've revised my contract in the last 6 months since we got rid of landscaping and snow, because our model for the first few years was we were making margins on landscaping, snow removal, construction maintenance.
Rightly so.
But we were performing the work, and that's kind of where, so our margins together were balancing out. But since removing that component so that we can do this other stuff better, I've had to rework the contract. So now it's like, okay, projects that cost over 10 grand, like, or, you know, it depends, like insurance things that are over 20 grand or projects that are over 10 grand that I got to get bids for and manage the project and make sure it's doing right. It's a 5%. Up to $100,000, and then it'll drop down to like a 2% or whatever it is. But it's in the contract, and they know going in, like, you know, it'll be and usually I say off the lowest bid. So even if they go with a higher bid, it's not like I'm steering them towards a higher bid. But it's like, okay, this is because there's a lot of work that goes into it. I got to get the bids. I got to make sure that it's being done right. I got to commute, and I explain that to them, and they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. But I'd rather have it that way in plain sight than just, you know, for people to find out or realize later on, hey, I paid more for this roof than I should have.
There's actually, it's interesting. A couple things. One, on insurance, there's a public adjuster. Usually it's 10%.
Okay.
So like we get that on that side. So we basically function as a person that's helping support that area. So
interesting.
So that's something that you can look into. But we've had some big fires and stuff. So the owner's not out anything, but ultimately it comes from the insurance company.
Right. And people don't realize how much. And we used to do the work, so we would make our margins on the construction, but there's so much work that goes into the paperwork and the pictures and the claim and fighting with them and all that stuff. And we do that all the time. It's fine if we're doing the work, but...
no, so look into like, there's usually 10% that's for like earmarked for like a public adjuster. So you just function in that role and you're fine. But in all of our contracts, we're very clear that we get to keep any fees from vendors or anything else. And basically we're very clear about it. And what we say is the reason why we can keep your cost as low as we can is because of the fact that we have other ways to make revenue. And if people really are that negative towards you, you almost should run away from them anyway, because they're going to second guess every one of your bids. They're going to second guess. I'm sure you have some associations that are more like financially tight than others. And they're probably like, they're questioning every little expense. So if you raise the prices on those and they fire you, that's perfect. Whereas, and the ones that like, it's more cursory, that they appreciate you and the value that you're providing, like they're not going to fire you because they perceive the value to be higher than the other ones that just want the lowest cost manager, right? And so that's some of the times that we're doing is when we're thinking about, and we call it value maxing. Some people call it fee maxing or whatever else, but we basically are trying to provide win-wins and other situations like that to provide value, and that we want to be compensated for the value that we provide. So things like we do, instead of one review, we do 3 because we use technology to get property reviews done for our owners more frequently, and that's on our cost, right? So things like that we do. But we price in. If people don't realize the value, there's, oh, you're just costing me more money. Like their perception is limited, and perception is that they're just looking for low cost. And they're the ones that are going to give you a disproportionate amount of your headaches.
Yeah.
So my target to you is, and what you do perhaps is, you are willing to lose. And so like, let's say you upped your pricing by 10% with your 12 associations. If you lost one, you're going to have less work and you're going to make more money.
Right. That's why you're the numbers guy.
Well, it's just, and I tell.
But then I can't go around saying that we've never lost an association.
Well, but you didn't lose it. You didn't lose it, right? Because
yeah.
at that point in time, but whatever. But again, and even that, like that's a framing that you should not have, because losing people is not the issue.
Bad. Yeah.
No, it's not, right? Because like you should lose people that have an inconsistent philosophy to how you want to run your association. Like, oh, I never lost a client in my life, but I have all clients of slumlords. Like, I don't want to associate with those people, right? Because they're not really the type of people that I want to manage for. So I had a person that was in Hartford, and I was like, I don't manage Hartford. I don't want to have to carry a gun on me. And the guy said, that's why I hire people to do it. I'm like, asshole. Like,
right.
Like
just putting other people at risk. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you're just all about money. You're not about trying to provide great service to your clients and trying to provide a great product for them to happily live in. Like that's what I'm trying to accomplish. And so like having a person fire you or whatever else, a lot of times it's an inconsistency with expectations and what they want from you. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? That's actually a good thing that sometimes that you lose people. Like I had a guy that I ended up having to fire. He, every single one of the meetings that I had with him, he would always say like, I'll be there at 2. I would call him at 2:05 while I'm sitting there. He's like, oh, I'm on my way. I have to go get keys and I have to do this. I'm like, and it would be 30 to 40 minutes of wait for this guy. And what was his real expectation? He's, I'm the one that's important. You're going to cater to my every whim because that's what I pay you for. I don't want to associate with people like that. If you don't value my time like I value your time, and that relationship is not mutual, I don't want to deal with you, right? So don't take it as, okay, well, I've never lost an association, and that's the end all and be all. What it really needs to be is I have associations that I like working for, and they like me, and they value me appropriately. You get those, you're going to win-win, right? You're going to make good money. They're going to be happy with the level of service, and you're going to want to die for them. Right? I mean, if there's associations that you like regret a little bit more, then my philosophy is raise their price to make it so that you have a smile on your face working for them.
It's not bad. I like it. I just because of the time constraints with our battery life, I do want to pivot a little bit, but I do appreciate your feedback on that. So this should have been at the beginning, and I feel like we've had a great conversation. We've got really deep into this stuff and kind of our mentality and philosophy, but we've failed to answer a very basic question for the viewers, and that is, how is our styles of property management different? Like, how does HOA management differ from the type of property management that you do, which I call residential, but that might not be.
Yeah, residential is close. So in my style, my client is the owner and my customer is the tenant, is the resident.
Okay.
So I get complaints and stuff, and then I am an intermediary between those residents and the owner. And then I have the vendors that I need to work on. I get to do things in my style that I could not do in your style. One of which is I can blame the owner to the resident on why I do or do not do something. Hey, the owner won't let me do it. You can't do that because it's HOA, right?
And say the board.
Well, the board won't. But then they're going to go to the board, and then they're going to find out it's a lie.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right?
I don't want to say that if it's true.
Well, agree. But like for me, if I know that in my good conscience, I'm not going to recommend to the owner to do something stupid,
Right.
I just blame the owner.
Got it.
Because in my good conscience, I could, and I've done it before. I don't think we should do this, but I told them that I'm going to have a conversation with you. So can I just tell them that I had this conversation with you, right? At this point, to certain levels when it's obvious,
Right.
I'm not even going to have a conversation, right? I could just get away with blaming the owner for something. Right. And so in same way, the owner can blame me for certain things, right? So like things like, rent increases. I make very strong decisions on rent increases. I'm the expert, but I blame the owner. The owner got to make money because their insurance is up and everything else is up, and that's all true. I'm not lying,
Right.
but I don't really have the conversation. I do have a conversation, but it's basically by email, and I give them recommendations. But then I can blame the owner on that. So that's one thing is like I'm an intermediary between these two things, and you have a board, but really your client is every single one of those owners.
Right.
Right, because they could fire the board and then like kick you out, and
Right,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
and that happens, right?
Yeah.
Like brand new boards come in because they think it was mismanaged, right? So that's one thing. So it's really a singular focus on owner, whereas yours is singular focus on board with an ancillary focus on making the rest of them happy.
Right. Greater good. I call it, I say my primary focus is greater good. Secondary is keeping the board happy.
Sure. And then I think of a lot of it is mentality, right? So they have an ownership mentality because they're all owners of the condo association to some level.
Right.
Where I have a tenant mentality, which is more about like, I need to get everything handled to me. I need like white glove service, more or less. And I'm sure you have some of that where the white glove, but like mine's a little bit more. Like it's not inconceivable for them to say, I want a refrigerator today.
Right.
Whereas yours, it'd be like, well, I know that would cost a ton of money, right? So they're a little bit more reasonable probably than my tenants, but I can kind of navigate it a little bit more effective than you can. And so it's just a different way of doing things. I also don't have to do things like, all the board stuff. There's a special certification, the CAM certification, which I'm sure you are,
Right.
that I don't have to have in it. When I started this business,
But you have to have your broker's license.
I have to have my broker's license.
See, I don't have to have that. I just need my CAM certificate. So, and this is what I want to clarify is our types of management are so different that our licensing is different.
Sure.
Right. It's a different animal.
Yeah.
Although that there's a lot of crossover and similarity.
Yeah, I mean, the physical work that has to be done is done similarly. Right. And a lot of the communications are done similarly, but some of the requirements are just different. I don't have to do reports. I don't have to meet with a board. I'm a lot more able to kind of do that. I only have to talk to one person and convince one person that they should renovate a unit or do a roof or whatever else, whereas you have to do these long-standing plans and things like that. I get to react a little bit more to situations as they come up. You need to plan a little bit more. With that said, my management is everything internal. Yours is usually all exterior, landscaping,
Common
roofs,
areas.
common areas, right?
and a lot of legal. We have to. I would say a good 40% of my job is legal procedures when there's rule violations or like when the condo docs are not being upheld properly.
Sure.
A lot of my value is added is through the proceedings and the legal, all the legal.
And that's the type of thing that I don't know if you do, but you should probably get money for that.
Yeah. So with our updated contract, we built
Because
some stuff in
because anything that does additional work
right.
above and beyond like how people should normally behave,
Right.
you have to do work. It's like late fees, right? So I know we're kind of pivoting a little bit. Late fees, people say, oh, it's a fee because I'm late. No, it's a fee because I now have to chase you for money.
It's because I don't get the late fees.
Well, but my point is it's an administrative fee.
Right.
Right. And so even with late fees, if you have administrative effort to try to basically collect that's above and beyond them paying on time like clockwork, you should get a portion of it.
Interesting.
Right? Because ultimately you're doing an oversized portion of the work.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a lot of it's the thinking about it. It's like, and if you want to really know how to win, figure out where you're spending all your time. Like find a really good condo and not really good condo, like with respect to the time, and say, what about this makes it more efficient? What about this makes it less efficient? And then start charging for those things that make it less efficient. Right? Because then all you're doing is you're level loading. You're like, you're more because I spend an exorbitant amount of time on these activities in your condo and I don't elsewhere. And you'll learn like where your time's going.
I like that.
So, but going back to this and the differences, so these are all some of the differences. Like, and in general in associations, you have a lot more owners. So there's a lot more people that that desire your attention.
Yep.
From my experience, I'm able to provide a higher level of service than most associations that I've dealt with. Most of the time, like I'm calling associations multiple times and they're never calling me back. Yeah. And that could be because of the fact that I'm not important to them, or it's like a service issue like you're talking about. And so, but that's just been my experience with people is I call and I have to call a few times to get, even if it's like they're sending me a report that the resident that I have in there has a lease violation, I have to because it's to the owner, not to the resident, I have to do certain things to make sure it's cleared up and
right.
And they don't ever respond. I had one that gave us a violation because there were supposedly possessions that were left in a hallway.
Yeah.
And they had it on camera. And I'm like, okay, it was the resident, can you prove to me that it was just trying to do something, right? It's like he said, she said. So because my resident's going to say, oh, I didn't do that, and so I'm like, can you give me any proof? There's things like that are just a little bit challenging. But so those are some of the major ones. I think we have a lot more hairier maintenance than you do generally.
Right. Well, yeah, I can see that.
I mean, your maintenance is bigger than mine.
Right.
Bigger issues, but I'm dealing with kitchen remotes, everything leaking. I'm dealing with, roofs all the time. I'm dealing with, bathrooms where they overflow the tub and then it's leaking down. You get those too, but it's usually owner to owner as opposed to because it's interior.
Yeah.
So you don't have to get as involved. So I think yours, you can plan a lot more than mine. And it's a lot probably fewer in total number of vendors. Like you said, landscaping vendors you have, probably roofing, maybe asphalt, stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas I've got a lot more plumbers, HVAC, I've got masons, I've got, all sorts of different vendors that I need to do. And each of the jobs are individual. Your vendor problems are going to be easier than my vendor problems because your vendors are more commercial and they want the big jobs because it's a lot of money and they want to price them. Whereas mine's okay, I need $300 this or that. And it's
finding someone to turn the key in the truck.
A lot of people won't want to do it, right? Everyone wants to get in the commercial because it's just easier, right? So I would say your vendor side's a little bit easier. That's likely why you had started a maintenance company and stuff like that because it becomes a little bit easier. Though a lot of successful property managers, even my space, have a maintenance company. I've thought of it many times.
Right.
It's just another thing that I have to deal with, another thing that I have to think about, another thing I have to deal with people, which I'm fine with, but it's finding the right people is hard.
Sure.
Let's take that on its head. So what else? What did I miss? What do you think is other things that I'm missing about the difference between HOA association management and residential?
I would say a big piece for me that I spent a lot of headspace talking about is politics. So there's a whole political aspect and kind of. And this is actually where I do really well. I thrive in this area because the people and the psychology, is understanding the tides of emotions amongst owners and understanding that it's ultimately a democratic process. Like in yours, it's the owner of the building. It's their place. Sure. They get to make the call, and you just have to keep them happy, right? With HOAs, there's this political tide undercurrent going on that you have to make sure that the perception is adequate to what the job you're actually doing, right? That you are doing. Everybody sees the job you're doing and they like it, and at least they don't hate you enough to go overthrow you.
Yeah.
So when I there's going to be. You have problem tenants and you can just either get rid of them or just not acquiesce, right? When I have a problem unit owner that's being unreasonable and I piss them off, I have to understand that I need for every enemy that I make, I need 2 more friends.
Sure.
2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this balancing act of sentiments, and I always have to make sure that the power dynamics are such where,
Yeah.
they're not going to overthrow everything.
Yeah, that's a big. I think it's probably is maybe the single biggest difference between what I'm doing. So mine's more of a dictatorship. Yours is more of a democratic process, and I've talked about that before. I've said when we're doing these things with these residents, we have the power to essentially kick them out of the property, and that's a huge amount of power. And I take that very seriously,
Right.
Because I want to allow these people to have good places to live, but I also want them to follow the rules, right? And I want them to pay rent on time, and I want them to do all of those type of things. So firm but fair is how I do it. You probably can't do firm but fair. You probably have to do, your perspective, but get allies and be very careful with what you say, because even if you're right, they have their own chip on their shoulder, and they think there's injustices and and some of there is favoritism and injustices. Right. So it's like I don't play that well with people that I think are making bad decisions irrationally and or emotionally and or whatever. Right. So that's another reason why I'll probably never do it.
Right, and that makes sense. And a lot of it too is there are situations where you do have legal basis for to go after unit owners.
Your
right?
bylaws, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, so.
Right, and you can get the attorneys involved and stuff like that. But there's a lot more like legal proceedings to an issue rather than just saying, "Listen, you got to get out." It's more like, okay, now we're going to have to put a lien on your property and take your house, but it's my property. So there's this it just seems like a lot of times the stakes are exaggerated. I'll also say that. Well, this goes into my next question is, do you own, and I think you already said you did, but do you own, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Do you do the type of property management you do? Do you have units in HOAs?
Yes, we have a few that are in HOAs, but not many. It's probably like probably 5%, maybe not even.
So my question to you is, what's your experience been with your units in HOAs?
Yeah, so luckily, one of the things that's good about me in general is we have a minimum expectation on the units and filling those units. And so whereas we do have some properties with some associations that are not the best, a bunch of them are in pretty good shape. Mostly they're owners that probably live there and don't want to sell it, so it's a better property, and so you'll get a better tenant quality that's more willing to follow the rules. In general, it's always interesting because if you were to have a lot of single-family homes, you're going to get a tenant base that is a little bit more entitled in that they are like high-powered professionals and they think that they deserve it, but they're a little bit more reasonable with like the expectations. They might sue you faster, but they're not going to call you because your thermostat's not working without having first put batteries in to check that it wasn't a battery issue. Whereas my people in C-class have more issues with normal things like not inadvertently turning off the emergency switch on a furnace. Right, so a lot of mine's more like hand-holding, but I would say that the condos by and large are a little bit higher scale than our multis, and so we get better tenants, so we don't have that many issues with long-standing tenants and associations, which is lucky. I mean, because if it got really bad, I probably would say like no condos. I'm not going to manage any properties in condos.
Yeah, so that's interesting because our approach is tenants are bad for business in the condo world. We do not like tenants, period, in our associations.
I think that's not necessarily fair. I think there is definitely a perception that tenants water down. I think a lot of that, though, probably is like preconceived notions about tenants.
I can promise you from experience that tenants are bad for business.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a handful of exceptional investors, and I know because Luke called me. They purchased a property in Country Squire, or one of their investors.
Sure.
And I was very upfront with him. I said, "Hey, listen, our perspective is tenants are bad for business. We're happy to, you just have to have impeccable selection because anything your tenant does that's against the governing documents,
Sure.
we're holding the unit owner accountable,
Understood.
right? And most of the issues we have, like when we take over a property, usually it's a high investor owner to owner occupant ratio, and that you said use the word dilute, but it makes the quality of life in that association that much worse because in general, tenants are transient. They have no investment into that property. Like they don't really care what happens to the community and maybe it's different. Your experience is different because A, you're a good property manager, and B, you are in higher end.
Well, or C, as an alternative, the condo association manager is probably not as buttoned up as you.
Maybe.
Right? So maybe they're not doing violations as much. Or maybe the areas that we are in has a higher tenant to owner population.
Okay, that could be it
so
too.
those could be other potential possibilities, right? So, but I think that, I think there is something to what you say.
Right.
And your experience, I don't want to say is wrong. But I do think that we have plenty of tenants that live in single family homes and should buy something. Right. Okay. So if those people are moving into a condo, they're going to be fantastic. So I think it probably is selection, but you don't want to get involved, right? Where you now have to like screen them because then you're going to get into fair housing and other issues. It would be ugly.
And I don't. And generally speaking, I mean, even there's penalizations in HOAs from lenders and from insurance.
Yeah.
That if your investment owner ratio is too high.
Sure.
Right. But in general, for just our position on quality of life in general is, we want as many want as many owner occupants as possible and as few investors as possible.
Sure.
Because a lot of time they're hands off and whatever. And again, that's not to say that I don't have investors at different associations that we have great relationships with. They're very responsive. They pick great tenants, and we don't have any issues. What I'm saying is that when we take over an association, 2/3 of the investor owners are out within 2 years because they're now being held accountable, whereas they never were for the action for their selection in tenants.
Yeah.
And then 1/3 is just actually really good investor owners, and we're happy, fine, no problem. But
so they're actually selling within 2 years.
Oh yeah, because they come in, they have one or two bad tenants, they keep getting called to hearings, notice hearings, fines, getting fined out the wazoo for every violation. Because I tell them, we're not investor friendly. This is not a place that you want to own an investment property, right? And there's even if there's nothing in the bylaws or something like that, I'm very clear because our experience with tenants, by and large, is awful.
Yeah.
That's our experience.
Yeah, and I mean, so we're talking about niching. You've even niched down even further, right? So you're only doing associations that have significant owner to tenant ratios or whatever, right?
Not when we take them over, but we get them to that point.
Well, but that's kind of your philosophy.
Yeah.
To some perspective, that's a value that you're providing, especially if those people want that, and so you should be using that as part of your marketing.
Okay.
Because if that's, our MO is that we are going to make sure that people are following the rules so that everyone has, full quiet enjoyment of the properties. And if it doesn't happen, we fine people until they get into line or they leave or move out. Is that the symbol?
That's why that we are what we are.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, but at the same point in time, as an owner, if I thought that tenants were a big issue, then I would like you.
Right.
But as an investor, I'm not going to or as an owner that potentially wants to sell in the future, I'm not going to like you because I might get a better sale if I can broaden it to owner occupants and investors. Right. So it's you're going to win in one place and lose potentially another. But I think that's admirable. I think you should market that because now you've niched out in a better way that some person's going to see even more value in the things that you're doing. And you should be able to receive a premium for that.
And I do market that. And because my ideal client is an owner occupant that wants to have full enjoyment, in general, owner occupants don't love tenants.
Sure.
Right. And you're correct that investors are, they don't share the same philosophy. But I will say this: typically, resale values are higher in that situation because what you find is association in general, the rule is in the HOA world that associations with high investment owners are usually more poorly run. They're not as well taken care of because it's all tenants who don't really care.
Sure.
And as a result, like the property value suffers. Also, an investor's, as you know, always looking at that margin.
Sure.
So they want to buy the property for as little as possible to make as much as possible on their cash flow.
Sure. And I would say, though, there is a delineation right now versus in 2012.
Sure.
So I think some of what you're saying and what you're seeing is based on the current market dynamics. Whereas I think if you were 10 years ago, people were just looking to sell to anybody. So you sold it to a price to an investor who wanted to make a return.
And they have the money and are willing
And so in that regards, I think what you're referring to is somewhat cyclical.
That's interesting. I never realized that or thought of that. But yeah, absolutely. Right now, investors don't want to pay a lot. People who are going to live there are willing to pay as much as because it's their home.
Yeah.
You know?
So right now, you're definitely going to want to sell to. We talk about it all the time. Like all my investors are selling owner occupants. So like I'm losing business a lot right now because a 4-family comes up and a person can't afford a single because they don't make enough. They can't afford 2-family because they don't make enough. They don't afford 3-family because they don't make enough. But now it's 4, and you've got 3 other rents that the banks are willing to declare as essentially
70%
income
of it, yeah.
And so now they can make the numbers work.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so like our MO right now is if you want to sell, let's get a unit vacant. Let's make it nice enough, paint, whatever, carpets,
And everybody
floors.
wants to be an investor right now.
But we're selling it to owner occupants. And so they're going into that unit so that they can live in it. They don't care about the other unit.
Well, bigger pockets, all this stuff. Everybody wants to get into real estate investing.
Sure.
Right. And it's a terrible time to, just because prices are so high.
Yeah.
But that's their entry point. That's how we did it. Right.
Sure.
The house hacking, get in one unit, rent out the others.
Yeah. I'd argue that every time's a good time to real estate invest, and every time to invest is a bad time. Like people said I was an idiot for buying single families back in 2012, 2013. Right? The proof is in the pudding because of the gift of hindsight. My dad used to say, and I used to say, he's the biggest idiot I know. He said, because he was buying back in the 80s when interest rates were 18%. And he used to say, if I only have to subsidize it $300 a month, in 30 years it'll be paid off. That was what he said. He's a multimillionaire, right? So I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that is my natural pervasive feeling that it's not good relative to some period before. But what I still tell people is if you want to buy something you want to hold for the next 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to make money on it. So there's always a good time to buy real estate, and it's always a bad time to buy real estate. It's always trendy or not based on market dynamics. It's the moody market, just like investing in stocks, right? And so when you're doing it, I'm still trying to buy right now. Can't find anything I want to buy, but I'm still trying, So I don't disagree with you for the global, but a lot of my discussion, hopefully you're getting, is the expansion of mind, because
Right.
that's where I am right now. Is even with our discussion about making a house an asset, right? Like it's all about figuring things out differently, and don't go with the conventional wisdom, because being a contrarian is how you're going to make money. That's how I made all my money in real estate, right? Not being smart, trying to reinvent the wheel, but looking at other people and how they do things well. That's how I do well. So I think that, if 18% investing then wasn't good, well, then my dad wouldn't be a multimillionaire right now.
Right. 18% interest, you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow. No, that's a good point. And so you're still buying.
I would.
What is it? 8-10% right now?
What? Interest
rates?
It's 8%.
8%.
So I'm lending. I'm doing some of that type of stuff, but I'd still buy.
That's great. That's a business to be in.
Yeah, I'm trying to do also. Well, yeah. Everything is. You just have to figure it out, and you have to be good at screening people and coming up with criteria to succeed in this game. So
interesting. So just because I'm starting to get concerned at the amount of time we have left on the memory cards of these two smaller cameras.
That's fine.
I do want to kind of jump into the next thing, and they're going to kind of be questions that go hand in hand. But we're doing this to be educational, informative, but
Sure.
also to be entertaining.
Hopefully.
And there are some things in our line of work that are certainly entertaining and that people would never have expected to happen because it's just like so wild. Right?
Sure.
So, do you have, without, breaching anybody's confidentiality, do you have any horror stories or war stories that
Yeah, so I got one that comes to the top of my end, and we always talk about how it's interesting how you get desensitized for horror stories, right? Because you get them all the time.
Yeah.
But one that I can remember that was pretty new when I had just started, there was a tenant that had kept like 15 roosters in a basement. The funniest thing about it was it was one of the cleanest basements I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah, they cleaned up after it every day because I think they have to, because I think chickens and stuff are such dirty birds. If you don't, like, it gets mosquitoes and flies, and then they fester and the thing. So you have to clean up after them all the time. So it was very, very clean. But yeah, they had chickens in the basement. It was in New Britain.
Rooster and chickens?
Chickens and roosters in the basement. Yeah.
Really?
I had to get them out. I told them, it was like, I was like, you have to get them out. The health department said that it's not clean. Otherwise, I have to evict you. They got them out real quick. I didn't even talk to the health department. I was just like, you got to get these out.
Probably were eating chicken for a while.
It's just a tradition of the culture of the people that were there, and it was interesting. So that was interesting. But there's always stories. There's always things going on. There's it's always, again, it's about people's perception of what is acceptable versus your perception of what is acceptable, right? Like, I don't think, like, we've heard of stories of people like, putting back together a motorcycle in a kitchen, right?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of stuff like that that's you'll hear, right? Or engines in a kitchen or whatever.
Yeah.
People, like, they're looking for a workshop space and there's none around, and they live in a property and they do it. I've heard of people that have kept in a basement like 40 or 50 exotic parakeets or something, right? Like, there's all sorts of stuff like that you'll come across. And it really is just the fact that you start to learn that people in the world just have different things that they want to do, and they're resourceful and they figure it out. And I applaud them for that, right? As long as it's not like going to significantly affect the health and safety of themselves or the building, right? Like, I try to, like, I don't want to turn an eye, right? Like chickens, that's a little extreme. But at the same point in time, like, I think there's something beautiful about people that are trying to come up with creative solutions to a problem, right? It's just different.
Interesting.
But but don't get me wrong. If I see something that shocks me, like, it has to change. But
Well, I'm actually really impressed that you had put such a positive spin on that, because when I was thinking of stuff that we've experienced, there was no positive spin to put on some of this stuff.
Well,
and it's like,
I bet
really
you,
good.
I bet you can, if you really think about it. What I talk about a lot is people are people that have great expectations but poor execution, or they have great ideas but they don't execute well, right? So the same concept, like chickens. Like, if there was ever a person that I would say yes to chickens in a basement, it was those guys, right? They made it as neat as possible. Like, you went down there and you're like, there's chickens down here. Not like you wake up and there's a smell and there's feathers everywhere and there's poop everywhere and because we've been around chickens. We had a farm growing up. So I just think that people have good intentions to just execute really poorly. And so, like, I'm always looking for people that have good intentions and good execution. It's for me, the bigger issue is people, we call it agency, and they call it the external or internal locus of control. So does world happen to you, or are you able to control like what happens? So, like, we talked about my mom dying. So we talked to the prosecutor because they were going to take this guy to trial, and we explained, like, what did we want? We wanted the guy to lose his license because, getting killed in a car accident, I don't think any person, like, purposely swerves into a lady to hit her. I think he probably was texting, looked down, looked up, and there was my mom, right? Because his car had kind of meandered. And so if that's my mentality, then in anything, it was the concept of he made a mistake and I want that to be the situation. So him losing his license is an appropriate punishment for someone that made a mistake related to texting in a car, even if it's death, right?
Right.
So, but what they said about it was, my family was, wow, you guys are amazing. Most people want vengeance, right? The world happened and you want a commensurate response. Whereas if it's internal locus of control, it's like, well, no, this situation happened. It sucks, right? But what do I learn from it? What do I gain from it? And so many people in the United States and in certain socioeconomic classes, the world happens to them. They have no ability to say, I was a part of that happening in any way, shape, or form. It's, I don't have food to eat because this happened, not I spent my money on other things and I didn't prioritize well, right? So you get this is why you get a lot of stories. People always, I got a story. Everyone has a story. I have a story, right? It's what you do with that story. But yeah, it's, so again, going back to the positivity of the chickens in the basement, I think of a lot of people, they, if they're willing to, have that internal locus of control where they like take responsibility for actions and things, like they generally are better off. So like, if I ended up saying you need to remove your chickens and you're being negative towards me, well, that's a different story than I say, look, you can't do this, and you remove them right away. So it's just it's a different mentality, but I definitely, anyone that, does what is necessary and is respectful and responsive when I tell them they're in violation, that's the case. But going to your point, would I have treated a condo that I rented as well as an owner? No. Do I have internal locus of control? Yes. What does that mean? That means that I would have probably followed the lease because I'm not trying to make a big mess. So I would argue that a lot of the experiences that you have, even with your bad owners, is people that think the world is happening to them and to tenants as well. And tenants, I would say, more often than not, do have that mentality. That's why they're still renting, because they could never buy because housing prices went up too much, or this or that, or my car broke down, or they have excuses for everything because they're just bad with money and they don't make good decisions. So that's probably more why you have these type of issues with the tenant base. It's more about them and their perception on the world and how the world is treating them.
It's not my first time hearing the concept of agency and locus of control, right? But it's my first time having it applied in this setting. And it's profound. It is very profound. And I think I've picked up on it, and I allude to it in indirect ways. Like there's times where there's certain people that I know I'm never going to be able to make them happy. Certain unit owners. And I've, through recovery and stuff like that, I've had to say, okay, this is a sick and suffering individual.
Yep.
And they, like, their unhappiness comes from within.
Sure.
It's not an external thing that I can fix. And if I accept that they have to live with themselves every day, sometimes it's like, okay, like I can treat them with a little more compassion and respect, because they're not intentionally trying to be terrible to me, even though they are being terrible. It's their life experience is causing this type of behavior, right?
Yeah.
Or how they're understanding the world.
Yeah, I've had that happen quite a few times, even in properties that I owned. I had a person that the world was happening to her, and I chalked it up really quickly to mental illness.
Yeah.
It was so bad that her therapist called us, breaking HIPAA, saying you need to help her get this person out. It was driving her therapist crazy. It was a hysterical story. But like, I always see the good in it. One, I did purchase the property from a person who was dealing with that person for an extended duration, and that's why I got it for a good price. So her difficulty was directly related to me purchasing the property, right? Because otherwise it would not have been as unpleasant for him, and he would have not given up when he did. So, there's always a reason if you kind of think about it. But where I did eventually get to with her is, even though there's mental illness and I can try to be as nice as possible, what eventually has to happen is you can't be their savior. You have to let the world help them get to where they need to get to.
Yep.
And that means you treat them just like you treat everyone else. You evict them when you need to evict them. You make them follow the rules the same way. The same thing with respect to the one-star reviews. A lot of it was like, I don't know why you do this. Why I gave you a background check. Why did you have to run a secondary one? I said, because it's discrimination of me to treat any person with preferentially, and I could get in trouble. So it's the same thing with this. I mean, I think I just kind of put in the back of my head, like, are you one that blames the world? Because if that's the case, like, I just know that it's going to take an inordinate amount of my time to like deal with you, as opposed to, and then I'm just, we just kind of file it in the back of our heads, and we kind of try to make it worth the while. So, raise rents appropriately if they're more difficult to deal with, so that the owner can make more money and we have more headache. So things like that we kind of do, we proceduralize. And we know who's good and who's bad, because every single person kind of gets a score based on how they react to, how they respond to us, our vendors, other residents, how they pay money, how they keep their unit, lease violations, things like that, right? It's all inputs to what makes a good or bad resident, good or bad owner, good or bad anyone, right? Good or bad association. I would say any association that doesn't go to bat for you, raise their cost, right? Because if they're not going to bat for you, they're not helping you. Have them find someone that they'll like.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And I think that a lot of the issues that we've had with unit owners, I think boil down to, you can contextualize in this, what's their life experience? Is it happening to them, or are they, are they being proactive in that? And I think that, what's interesting is we all figure out what I don't want to say it's a superpower, but it's like, why am I in this business? Like, what about me is uniquely suited for this?
Sure.
And I have a very strong instinct when it comes to, safety, security. Like when I feel threatened or attacked personally, or that the association is in great danger, right? My instinct takes over, and while I can be very compassionate in a logical sense, when there's someone who's threatening the life and safety of my client and my ability to put my family's food on the table, like all of that just gets triggered. Mm-hmm. I'm able to focus all of my resources on destroying that enemy. Right. And it's not like, I don't mean that in a good way or a good sense, but it makes me very effective at my role and why people hire me, because usually they're in fear that they're going to lose everything and they need someone to come and save them. And that's the idea. So I'm going to give you an example, because you were able to put a very positive spin on this, and I respect that. And, as I'm telling you this, I'm like, oh, do I edit this out or not? But, but this is something reflecting on this, I've realized. So we had a unit, and this complex in Hartford, and they have their mechanical closets on exterior walls. And this investor had purchased this unit and just left it vacant, like remodeled it, and was going to put a tenant in there, and just turned all the utilities off. And it's the middle of the wintertime. And the pipes burst and flood out his unit and the neighboring unit and the upstairs unit. And it was a mess everywhere. And as this torrential waterfall is coming out of his maintenance closet, he gets there with his plumber, looks at it, sees that it's not inside the four corners of the unit.
And blamed you.
And says, it's not my problem, and just walks away. Right. And so I pay my plumber to fix it, and I say, this is not a me problem. These are the condo docs. It is a you problem, right? And it's January. It was on my anniversary, my wedding anniversary. January 12th is when the first time happened. And I had to stop what I was doing to go handle this situation. And then it happened again a week later because he didn't fix it. And then again later that month. And each time it caused more and more water damage. And he just didn't care, right? It was just, and those types of situations trigger that instinctual piece of me.
Sure.
That is just, built for war. And I just utilize all my resources on behalf of my client to destroy whatever is threatening the safety and security of their investment. And so after the first few years of being in business, and this is kind of probably a little bit of the difference between your type of property management versus my type of property management. There's usually a person, my ratio is 1 to 50. For every 50 units, there's one crazy, or there's one person that is threatening the security. And
mine's so much higher than that.
Really?
Yeah, not 1 to 50, but 1 to 10 maybe.
Okay,
yeah.
Sure.
It's not lower or whatever.
Right. But that one is usually their behavior is such where they're putting at jeopardy and risk everybody else.
Sure.
Right. And I think what makes me, and it's probably something that as I do more therapy and improve myself, I'll be worse at my job because it's that piece is
relative to how you currently feel. You'll be different than your job. You won't be worse or better.
Okay. Well, that's good. But it allows me to say, okay, this person is threatening the safety or the project, everybody else's unit or whatever, and it triggers this instinctual thing of it's threatening my ability to do my job well, and I could be liable, I could be at risk.
Sure.
And it just, everything comes down. It's like, okay, we get the attorneys involved, we mount everything, and then the more you continue to fight me, it's just like, how do I describe? I was always playing sports, and I'm not like the most athletic or coordinated, but I'm clutch.
Sure.
Right? Like I was playing pickup basketball. I didn't score all game, but then I scored the game winner. Right? Like just one of those things where when all the pressure's on, when stakes are the highest, I perform my best.
Sure.
And so this line of work has given me this like ability, this forum, this place where that I can exercise that in a safe way. Right? Because I'm not fighting in the military. I'm not in a police role or whatever. But when things are at their most critical, this instinct takes over, and I handle things the right way, flawlessly. It's like they escalate, and I have the stomach for it.
So what's interesting about it is they actually talk about who's the best property managers, like by profession. It is police.
Really?
Yeah. So what you're describing is exactly what makes good property managers. So
really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's because to a certain level, it's also about learning how to de-escalate situations. It's about following protocols. Right. It's about all of those type of things. And so police officers are some of the professions that they say make the best property managers. I thought you were initially going to say something that you didn't end up going. Which was related to, I thought you were going to talk about more like fiduciaries, like I'm like a lawyer and I want to take care of my client. But then you kind of went down a little bit of a different hole. I would say that you should read the book, The 4 Agreements, if you haven't.
I have.
You should read it repeatedly.
Okay.
Because
you need it.
What you're describing is like, because you're holding on too tight. Right. And so the whole concept is work a good day, do everything in your power, but let go that you did a good day. And because I had another friend that had an issue where he felt someone slighted him and he wanted to destroy that person. And it's a cancer to your soul and your heart to not be able to let things go. And so the 4 Agreements is all about, when you ultimately have this negative person, they essentially, when it's affecting you negatively like that, it means they have power over you. And it's a funny thing. It's like all these people that talk badly about Elon Musk or whatever else, right? And people say different things. They'll say, "Oh, the number of haters is good because it's related to polarizing people or whatever else." But the real truth of the situation is when someone can't get under your skin,
you're in a better spot.
They mean nothing to you. Like people that are coming to me and thinking about me all the time, I don't even think about. And that's that's the real power. And that's where I just do my job. I'm firm but fair. So what does that mean? What I would do is I wouldn't think about too much. I'd build a process that I'm going to follow these steps to make sure this happens. And if it doesn't happen, it goes to this step, and eventually the lien occurs. And it's not even emotional.
You remove the emotion from it.
It's just, this is what we're going to do. And I do that all the time. People get mad at me because I'm just letting you know, I'm going to turn you over to collections if you don't do what you're supposed to. I'm going to do it. I'm just letting you know so you're not surprised. I'm always I don't want a person to be surprised because I feel like if someone's surprised that they're getting evicted, I've failed them. If any of my employees are surprised they're getting fired, I've failed as a leader, right? Because if you go so far to just fire someone without giving them like opportunities for improvement plans and things like that, like they don't have any of the like the ability to know.
So interesting.
Yeah, so this is just difference between me. So I just like cut through it where you're probably more like passionate. You're like, you're fired, like Elon Musk.
No,
right?
no, not like that. But I'm more like calculated. Where I like if they're, I'm big into like art of war and stuff like that. So like if they're my enemy, I want to be underestimated. I don't want them to see me coming. I want them to be surprised because I show.
Yeah,
like
but
I have
a tenant's not my enemy. A resident's my enemy, and my owner wins when I can get the resident to do the things they're supposed to.
Right, and I think that's the difference of the nature of what we're doing.
Sure.
Because I'm representing the interests of a side, and that side is the majority of unit owners.
Yeah.
There's always a counterpart, someone who is actively fighting against the interest of everybody else.
Sure.
Right. Whereas with you, it's a little more symbiotic because the tenant ultimately is paying the bills for the unit owner.
Yep.
Right. So there's this partnership or friendship, right?
Absolutely.
The rules are in place because so that we can all benefit each other. Whereas in an HOA, this is why I say it's political in the sense that yes, the HOA runs the best when everybody gets along, but human nature is such where there's going to be people who are fighting for their own interests over the interests of the greater good.
Sure.
And in that respect, I represent the greater good, and I fight on the behalf of my client, which is the HOA.
And I think what you're doing is admirable. I think you're doing so much more than any other associations have, which means you should have lots and lots of perceived value and goodwill that you need to figure out. And to me, it's a certain level, whereas like if you raise the prices because you recognize that you're providing value in and above any of these other association managers, and you feel like you're giving them your all, and they don't see it that same way, I just want to let them go. That's why you, especially like you raise the price to what you think your value is, and then you make more money. Because the alternative is like you grow to a scale, to a size, but like I promise you, none of your employees are gonna die like you die for your clients. The same thing with me. Like they're not gonna do it. So how do you scale that? You really can't, right? So what I would say though, and this is where one place that I kind of wanted to go is, I'm gonna turn the tables on you since you've been asking me so many questions. Like define a perfect property manager. Who is a perfect property manager? Like what are the characteristics, the personalities of a perfect property manager? I gave a talk on this, so I have very strong opinions.
So in my space, and let me preface it by saying, I think that there's not necessarily a perfect property manager. There's a perfect property manager for an application. It's a marriage, right? So each situation could be a little different. Each association can be a little
different. There's different levels of what's necessary, but I still think that for the work, like you're always going to do paperwork, right? In any HOA, you're always going to do paperwork. There's always going to be a good amount of paperwork that needs to be done. Yes?
Yeah. But you can always have an assistant do that.
But I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is like in the property management organization, someone has to be very organized.
Sure.
So one of the things of a perfect property management person or organization is to be organized.
Okay, I get what you're saying, and I have not given that too much thought. I was going to give you a definitive answer on your question that I believe my core values are the core values of the company. Perfectly define what makes a perfect property manager.
Sure.
And so they're tag high, right? Transparency.
Okay.
Accountability. Okay. You screw up, you are accountable, and you keep others accountable. Gratitude, that we're grateful for our clients, and that we kind of push that, create a good environment, interpersonal environment by demonstrating gratitude. Humility. Right. And integrity. And I think the biggest is integrity.
Sure. So like some of those like integrity is like do the right thing, right?
Do the right thing when no one's looking.
Sure. Yeah. And those are personality types. But like, again, I guess I think of it a little bit differently. But I would say that like the gratitude, I think positivity is one of them.
Right.
All right. And I said organization's another. Another one is being good at communication. Right. For me, it's more about like, because you're talking about like, what are the like core values you want? And like, I'm more talking about like, what is a personality trait? If people suck at communication, you're not going to win in this game. Right.
Right.
Psychology is another one. We've talked a lot about that.
Huge.
Right? And then another one is problem solving, like being super analytical, because certain problems, and maybe you don't think so, but maybe certain problems come up and it's like, okay, there are multiple different solutions to solve this problem. Like, what is the best solution? And so it's taking the physical, and some of it is me taking it from an engineering perspective, right? Because this is somewhat me, but I see that. But like, yeah, sure, transparency is very important, but I know lots of non-transparent property management companies that
are effective.
They
make a lot of money,
but they communicate well and they're organized, and even the psychology. I think like you're doing so much more than you even realize. I think because most property management companies don't have a psychology piece. I think that some of them have an analytical piece. Most have organization and communication pieces, and most of them do it from really positivity, good customer service. So most of them have the customer service as the foundation, and then they have good communication and organization. And that might be all they have. They don't have the other two that I think stand out, which is the psychology piece and the analytical problem solving aspect. But I think that but yours are describing great client value. So I have in my own organization, I have 4. So I have like client centric, we call it serve first, serve well.
Okay.
Then I have win together, lose together. It's about teamwork and accountability.
Right.
Always improving, continuous improvement, and then technologically focused, using technology as a tool to improve performance and productivity, not as the end all and be all.
And I think that's another big component, that a lot of HOA management companies are stuck in the dark ages.
Yeah.
And they're still keeping paper files and they're doing paper stuff.
Sure, but you could, if you're organized and you have good systems, you don't need technology to be able to you probably will be inefficient, but it doesn't make you ineffective.
True.
So, because it's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But I choose to use technology to leverage so that I can have my people do the things that move the needle the most.
Right. But we're getting to the point where it is becoming, they're losing clients to me.
Sure.
Because the HOAs want an online management system.
Sure. And another reason why you're providing additional value relative to the existing ones that you need to realize, right? You're providing additional perceived value. And if your cost is equal to this other one, well, they're not really firing them because now their perceived value is less than the cost. They're firing them because your perceived value is higher than the delta to the cost that you have. So if you're matching them, of course they're going to go with you.
Right.
Right. And so, but if you've now done it for a year or so, then you need to be able to realize the true value that you reached. Right. And so having a good pulse on the board, making those friendships and explaining to them things like, hey, just so you know, like my costs have gone up quite a bit. And like, I need to give raises to people. Like, I don't know if you see what's going on with insurance. Of course you do. You're seeing the insurance side. Like, what do you think is happening to me? Like, I need to make more money. And you could just see their pulse.
I need to make more money.
Well, I need to raise my price.
And usually, and
they'll be like, yeah, makes sense, right? And then you'll know that you probably are not going to get fired,
right?
If you go within reason. So.
And usually, it's usually one person on a board who's just.
Of course, it's the treasurer type. It would be me. Like, why can't we bring the price down? Like, right. Why is Jared deserving all this extra money? Like, he did it for that much last year. Right. Cost of inflation only went up 3%. Why is he going up 5%? Right. But that's why a board is effective, because you do have some people that complement, like we talked about. Like you and I are kind of polar opposites in some ways. We're both trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to run a really effective business.
Right.
And so like this is the whole part, even if you want to go back to the Bible, is it's a one part, many members, right? Many parts of the body, right? But it's one body, right? So it's the same concept that in anything that you do, and even an organization, having someone that's organized, having someone that's great with psychology, having someone that is great with communication, right? And building the teams and using those people in their unique capabilities for the benefit of the company, right? It's a lot of the same type of considerations that you need to make when you're looking at, okay, what are the weaknesses in our current organization? I saw it. We were going way more man heavy. I was like, all right, I want to hire some more females. And now I think we have 3 women and 8 guys. But I mean, it's partly my personality because I'm a driver, right? And so, but like, we went from more women than men to only men to now we're yo-yoing back relatively well. So, but it's the same concept. This is why, like, I actually like the concept of trying to specifically have diversity in organizations, trying not to have it look, all like you and I as an owner, right? It's getting that level so that we can make something better together, because of the fact that we're including people from different perspectives and worldviews. I mean, this whole conversation that we've had today, I would have had a way different conversation a year ago, right? And that's because having the different perception and having the different walk and having the different, learning is allowing me to see things very differently than I would have even a short duration ago. And that's the beauty of the journey that you're on and working to, figure out where you want to go. And that's the beauty of the business is we can all do it different ways and all get to where we want to get to. It's unique for each of us and how we want to get there.
I love it. And I hope that we can pencil in a year from now to do a little check-in.
Sure.
All right. Cool, man. So I got one last question for you. And I think that this is, I don't know where I heard this question, but I thought it was a really astute question that is usually asked in interviews. And what is one of the most difficult problems that you, problems that you've come across, and the subsequent solution that you are super proud of, or the result that you were able to achieve that you're super proud of that in retrospect?
I don't know if I have a good answer for this, but I'll just, I've been very blessed. I had a 4.0 in college, was the top student, but it was just part of the game. I think even right now, I've been really working a lot on myself and trying to become a better father, husband, whatever. But I think recognizing and making the active decision for self-improvement is super humbling, right? Because it's like, well, what's wrong with you? Nothing. But why can't I be better, right? Why can't I continue to improve, to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be all of those things? And I'm still a work in progress, so I don't want to claim like, but I think that to some level that is, you're always a work in progress. Mm-hmm. But I did have at least a recognition, and I've had a recognition for a long time to do the hard things. Even marrying my wife, I married her because she was going to make me do things that I knew were good for me, but I knew that I would naturally resist, right? Like going on vacations and things like that, because I drive a $600 car,
Right.
And I'm either cheap or I'm a homebody. So I think that I've liked that about myself, that I've not just taken the easy way out ever. And it's not always difficult, right? Like we talk about it so much about with our kids, we can just give them ice cream when they ask for it and take them to every activity and clean up after them, and they're not as well-rounded and supportive kids as they could be. So, we've done a lot of things. I'm doing a lot of things that I think are countercultural, that are counterintuitive to the majority of the worldview, and playing the game the way that I want to play it, I think is something that I'm super proud of. And, it's even difficult with, with my wife and children, because they're not on the same journey and they don't see it the same way. But I still stick to my guns, and that causes conflict. But, I think that all things considered, it's turned out pretty well. So I'll say the journey that I'm on and doing hard things and doing things counterculturally to never take the easy way out. I don't know if that was a good answer, but that's what came to my mind. So.
No, I like it. It's an honest answer, and it's your answer, which is good. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't mind a little side note.
Sure.
So I've got a little bit of a dark sense of humor. Okay. And I'm going to share something with you that I often joke about, and there's a hint of truth in my kind of worldview.
I feel like every joke has a hint of truth to it. So.
Right. So, but you're the first person that is actually in a position to advise me on this. So everybody asks me whether my wife and I are going to have kids, and we've made the decision, that we don't want kids, at least with the world the way it is, because things are crazy. And every once in a while I get a little squirrely and I'm like, hey, we should have some kids, right? And she's like, no, like you really want to, like, we have a good thing going, like you really want to do kids right now. And so I was an only child. She's one of two. Mm-hmm. And I was a miscreant during my late teens and early 20s. And it destroyed my mom. Like, my mom has PTSD from the phone calls in the middle of the night from the police, right? And so I always say that a minimum number of kids is 6 kids, right? I say you can't have less than 6, because if I were to have less than 6, it'd be too much pressure on me as a parent, because like they all have to turn out well. But at 6, it's like, I always joke about, like, you got a few burners in there, right? Like, they're not all going to turn out great, but some are going to be better than others and this and that. And people always just shake their head at me and like, you're clearly not a dad. And so you're the first person I've come across that has the minimum number of kids. And I always say that you really just have to do a great job on the first one. The first one can kind of like take care of the rest. And it's like, survival of the fittest, right? That's how I envision having 6 kids. And so this is a personal thing where it's just like, as someone who has 6 kids, I'm just curious as to what your actual experience is, because I know mine's probably pretty far off.
So this goes back to being a better parent, father, everything else. Yeah. I think that being an entrepreneur is one of the best things you could ever do to be a good parent.
Okay.
I think that if you do a good job parenting, all 6 will turn out good.
Okay.
I think that you do have, so the story that I tell is I used to go to the park and I'd see the kid who threw sand in my kid's eye. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, bad parenting. And then I ended up having one that threw sand at another kid's eye. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. So I think there's some natural thing where kids have their own personality and their own experience, but I think you can still shape them. I think what you need to do though is you need to shape them each uniquely. Kind of like this conversation where I work and operate a certain way and I've blown your mind in some areas, and similarly you've worked in a different way, and some of the things that you've said and ideas are like completely foreign to me.
Right.
I think that's true of your children. Okay. And I think that's where I think a lot of people try to run a household one way. My mom used to say, it was one of her famous lines, is fair is not giving everyone the same, but fair is giving everyone what they need when they need it. Mm. And I think that's what's so hard about our world today, is that everyone wants to do everything the same for everybody. Mm-hmm. But in reality, if we could tailor an understanding of the people and what would help them best, we can help that much more. I mean, it goes even to our healthcare system with the Apple Watches and these targeted treatments and things. If we can get the information and provide them with the true resources that people need, we can really change the world. So I think parenting is like that. It's more about giving the kids what they need when they need it. All my daughters are different. All my sons are different, and I have to motivate them differently. And that's the beautiful thing about it, but it's also the maddening thing about it, because what works for one doesn't work for another. This is why there's no such thing as a really definitive parenting book. Mm. And not only do you have that, but then you have birth order, right? Like oldest, middle, youngest. So I think that, even with you and your consideration for having kids, I think the better question is alignment with your wife and you, because having kids is really a commitment, and it's something that you shouldn't take lightly, and it can very significantly affect your relationship. And so, that would be the bigger thing that I would say is, and then what we did, my wife and I, was we decided that we were going to stop when it stopped being fun. Mm. And some of it I attribute to God as well. Mm. That, with my understanding of birth order, I didn't want the youngest child that was maybe going to be a little bit like you, a miscreant, mm-hmm. and going off and causing a lot of stress to me. So my third one was sassy, presumptuous. She was super intelligent, and she still is. Mm-hmm. I was like, she can't be my youngest because she's going to run all over me. Right. My next one was the sand thrower. Okay. And he's kind of a little bit of a bully. And I'm like, okay, he can't either. So then I had twins. That's when I waved the white flag. And they're awesome. They actually complement each other very, very well. And so I'm very thankful with how we stopped the family. But I knew that we were done when we were done. So I wouldn't say that if you did decide you wanted kids to say it's all or nothing, 0 to 6. But at the same point in time, I think that they're all different, they're all unique, and they're all a gift. And it's a lot of the joy that we have in our lives is that. I mean, you talk about it, and you are to certain levels building into people, your friend that you spoke about with the brisket and other people, and facilitating those relationships. Like if you don't have kids, your work becomes so much more valuable, important to you, right? And there's something about having a way of, blowing off steam, letting go with the kids. Like Wednesday, I'm going to my nephew's soccer game, right? It's gonna be awesome, right? Like, and I get joy and pride from that, and going to see my nephews, my daughter on the football team. So those are really fun things. And I think that for me, if I look for the future, and again, I'm very future focused. If I was you looking at my future, would I be sad about, would I feel contentment about me continuing to be married and traveling the world and or whatever, and not having Thanksgiving with kids and grandkids and Christmas with kids and grandkids? If that doesn't excite you at all, then you probably will be perfectly happy not having any children. Whereas for me, like the thought of having no one to share holidays with and experiences with and help, like that thought is like terrifying to me. So I think that's a bigger answer to the kids equations. But if you do decide, go with one, and
Can't leave it at one. 100% cannot leave it at one.
So then go to one and then go to two and then go to three, one at a time, right? Like you can't just go from. It's the same thing with business. Like if you're going to do yourself a disservice if you want to judge the performance of your course from 1 million sales the first year, right? Like it's like, okay, I want to make 1 sale. Now I make 2 sales a day. And I want, it's about incrementally getting to wherever you want to get to, right? Because I think with you're going to struggle because you're like me, you're not going to enjoy all of the intermediate points along the way that got you to where you want to get to. They talk about it in some of these books about, they call it the gap and the gain is one thing that Dan Sullivan from Profit Coach talks about. Whereas when you look at a perception of where you want to be relative to where you are, it's demoralizing. But when you look at the perception of where you are relative to where you were, it's motivating. So if you constantly are looking for what I'm not accomplishing, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And so my only concern about you and what you said about that is like, if it has to go to 3 or has to go to 6 or whatever, it's like, start with 1. Be happy with 1. And then if 1's not enough, be happy with 2. And if 2's not enough, be happy with 3. And eventually you'll get to a point where you'll say, I think I'm good. I really think so.
So, well, thank you. I think that's a good advice. And the hardest part's going to be convincing the wife, because she's pretty, while she would make a great mom and she loves that idea, she's pretty certain that
you have to ask the question, like, why? Like, what is it about kids or the thought of having kids that scares her?
Just the world. The condition of the world and people getting worse and the world getting worse.
That's true, but that's why you get to make your own unique part of making the world a better place.
Right.
Through your kids.
I think it's the fear that there's so many, and as a Christian, like we can talk openly. I mean, there's just so much temptation and badness and ways that kids can get sidetracked or go wrong and stuff like that and may never come back. And the fear, I think for her, the fear of failing or the fear of losing even a single one is overwhelming.
And you have a different perception, right? And perspective. But I would say, do you think that you grew because of the experiences that you had as a kid? Do you think you would be where you are currently if you didn't have those experiences?
No, I'm grateful for them.
So if that's the case, then the world and having the world be a hard place is part of the journey. And trying to not have a child because you want to insulate them from potential bad things that could happen.
I think ultimately it's her insulating herself from the pain that it would cause her.
So, but then the question is, so your philosophy, it's better to never have love than to love and lost? You can come over for dinner and we can delve deep into this if you want to. I don't really care, but at the same point in time, just know that this is one of those big ones that's especially if you're starting to have the thoughts again, you need to get right with her, or you need her to get right with you, because it is going to cause a schism as you continue to think about it.
I appreciate that. I will. Mine is, I think she really broke my desire down pretty well.
Sure.
She knows me pretty well. And she boiled it down to, in a lot of ways, I'm a very analytical person.
Okay.
And I hear about the type of love that a parent has for their child.
Sure.
And I've never experienced anything close to that. I'm a very, just due to my past and stuff like that, I'm a very emotionally detached person.
Okay.
And so the way she explained it, which actually resonates, is that I want a kid so bad because I just want, I hate there being things in this world that I don't understand. And because I haven't experienced that type of love for a child, I can't understand it. And so I want a kid so that I can understand it.
I don't know if I believe that, but she could be right. She could be wrong. I don't know. Going to this, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages.
It's a great book. I read it.
So what's interesting is, do you know what your love language is?
Yes. Physical touch and then acts of devotion.
Okay. So I used to think mine was quality time and physical touch.
Okay.
But I realized recently that I only have one love language, and it's words of affirmation.
Really?
Yeah. And here's how messed up I am. I believe this to be true. I don't like to be vulnerable to anyone, to love. And so I do everything in my power to be the best so that I don't need to be affirmed.
Makes sense.
So when I was struggling as an entrepreneur, all I was craving for is people telling me I was on the right track, I was doing the right thing, I needed it. And I was so like depressed and everything else, because I was like thinking I was going to lose everything. And so now that so that's another thing with me is like the anxiety and stuff. I do everything in my power to not feel that way. So I feel like I do everything in my power to not feel vulnerable to love. So kind of talking to you, but I'm not screwed up in that way like you're referring to with my kids.
Right.
My kids are they're cool, right? Like I'm more cerebral about it. Like none of my kids would say that I'm loving, right? I treat it like probably more like a business, right? Like we're talking about. So
that's how I grew up.
But what I will say to you is like, and this is kind of piggybacking what I just kind of said, is I actually talked about it with some other people. I look at like all the people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, probably Mark Cuban, maybe he's still married, I don't know. But like Warren Buffett, he had a very non-traditional marriage. All of them, Jeff Bezos, they all get divorced. Do you know why? Why is it that 50% of the population gets divorced? And Christians at the same level. I kind of started to understand it finally.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of ways you can do it, but I would like to know your perspective on it.
So my perspective on it is that it used to be that the family was the center of the house, and there's so much of us was an agrarian society where it was about farming and stuff, and so you would have kids to work the farms, and the mom was there and the dad was there, and they're all there for common goals. It was family and sustaining themselves and the family. Like that was the whole focus. And so a marriage is very complementary to that goal. Now it's about two people in a relationship getting married with each having their own unique goals for what they want out of their careers and their lives. And they have their own growth. So like I'm on this journey. We've been talking about this the whole day. If I'm on this journey like this, and let's say my wife stays here, she doesn't want anything. Well, I'm going away from her. Well, what if she's on her own journey? Well, she doesn't have to go this way. She can be going this way. So I'm still growing apart from my wife, right? So that's why I was talking about like the children. Like if you eventually continue on this journey where you continue to start thinking about kids and she's now going a little bit the opposite way, it's causing a schism in the marriage. And so I actually talked about it that one of the ways I'm trying to save my marriage is specifically having my wife join the business. Because instead of going from, look at what I've accomplished in my business, you did nothing. Yeah, you were home with the kids, whatever, right? And I don't say it that way, but it's a thought process, right? But it's like, I'm bringing in all this extra money so that you can spend it. Well, I'm home. Well, but instead if she's now working with the business with me and starting to understand it, and we're collaborative and we're this and we're that, well, we're doing it together, right? And so I put her into a position where she's uniquely gifted in the portion of the business that she's in. She's in sales, and she's great with people. She's fantastic. And so like she sells better than I can. And so we just put her in the one thing that she actually enjoys and she's great at. And so in that regards, like she doesn't have to be equal to me in it, but we're on the same journey again. So whereas so many people get divorced after their kids get out of school because they've gone on the only thing that was holding them together was kids. And now that's gone. Like you'll see if you watch it and look at the people that like when their kids got out of school, they started divorcing a lot more. Like they were all married for their kids. It's like it's crazy. And so you have to be married for more than your kids, and you need to figure out ways to make your relationship continue to be vibrant. And I think like running a business together is one way to do it. And it doesn't have to be like you're each in it like crazy, because she still wants to support the kids. So I'm like, all right, you got to give me 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week. Just figure out how to make it work.
So, yeah, I mean, I've offered that, and she's like, us not working together is the reason why we're still married, because her big thing is like words of affirmation and quality time and all that stuff. And in business mode, I'm a different person.
Okay.
Right. And I'm very I don't want to say aggressive, but I'm a little more this isn't like we're all down to business, really. And she's like, you don't have the capacity to just be unconditionally nice in your business world, in your business life. And that's true. And she was like, and I would need you to treat me like your wife and not like an employee.
See that you have to compartmentalize.
Right. Well, she can't do it, and I can't.
Yeah. So I think, and so some of the challenge there is if she's in a position where she's better than you are, well, then of course you're gonna be nice. She's better than you. That's what you have to do. You have to find that unique thing that she's uniquely gifted and way better than you.
Taking care of people.
Okay, well, that's where you would want to put her if you decided you wanted to do it. But it was my recognition of it that I was like, we're probably, it's like might not make it,
right?
Years from now. And like, I want to save my marriage. So It's like, but no one says, okay, you save your marriage by joining the business. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's like the opposite of what you do if you want to save your marriage. But it's more like, like she would probably stay married to me, and I might begrudgingly do it, but like I'd be like holding long-standing grudges.
Yeah, you do it out of duty and out of faith.
Yeah, but like when she's like literally doing it and we're literally growing a business together, it's a we. Look at what we've accomplished instead of look what I've accomplished, right? And so I'm very conscious of it, and so I'm hoping that eventually. I think that like she's already doing an amazing job, and right. It's funny though, because we're not on the same journey of like self-development. And so like, she'll like get all this frustrated, and I'll be like, it's obvious. It's just this. And she just like gets mad and stuff. It's like, cause like I'm trying to turn my home life into like a business. It's like, not like making money, but it's like you do the same exact things that you do with people in your home. Like the best practices of growing a successful business and how you treat people, how you motivate people, how you do that. It's all the same things you do with your kids.
I know you got to take that.
That's all right. So,
well, for what it's worth, she referred a potential client to me a couple weeks ago, and said, "Oh yeah, Jeanette's her name, right?"
Yanina.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did she go by Jeanette for that?
No.
No.
You just probably added a T somewhere where you shouldn't have.
Okay, that might be it. So, someone said, "Yeah, they referred me to you," and I'm like, "Who could this possibly?" It was out of New Britain, and this and that, and then like I'm like racking my brain. I'm like, "We don't have any properties in New Britain. I don't know this person. Like, how'd they find it?" And then she said Eddinger, and I was like, "Oh, then it made sense."
Yeah, we're trying to now the process I'm building like a referring out process. So when it's condos, I just send it to Jared.
Well, I appreciate that.
So.
I appreciate that, and we're still working on trying to figure out a way to work together.
That's all right.
But yeah, man, thank you, and you've given me far more time than you signed up for, and far more than I probably.
I enjoy these forums for whatever reason. Hopefully, you cut it up into some really useful stuff. But my parents were teachers, and so I just love to share. So,
dude, well, thank you for taking the time to be here, and this is Sam Eddinger, Ironclad Property Management. If you're in Central Connecticut, and you are looking for a residential property manager for your investment property, he's the guy. And now you know why.
Thanks.
Thanks.